adopting the agenda?
Chairman, I'll make that motion that we adopt the agenda.
My only concern in looking over the agenda as presented was that we have the off-at-Kerman business towards the end of this agenda under new business. And with it being, I would believe, something that, approves an hourly charge, I wondered if it wouldn't behoove us to move it up in the meeting.
Could we, are you all charging for your time sitting here today?
Yes, I likely. Yes, I am.
Well, yeah, and the effort to save county money, if it turns out that way, probably not a bad idea. Does that make any difference?
Where do you recommend we move it?
I would think as early as advisable would be probably after public comment. If everyone else would be willing to bump back one spot, I think it would be very helpful in terms of incurring of expenses if we could move it up in the agenda, regardless of who ends up paying the bill.
Is the superintendent okay with that? Your time's valuable.
I'm here.
Is this just one of you all today or two of you today?
It's just one, sir.
Just one today?
Yes.
So what is your rate for being here today?
350.
350?
Yes, sir.
I'll amend my motion to move, is it K3 up to, just make it C1, with minutes down to C2. Make it C2.
I second that motion.
Let's make it C2.
Motion made and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carried. Go to the minutes.
So I've got a couple of issues with the minutes. One is I don't quite understand when we adopted the minutes last month. It says here that Mr. Frazier wanted to change it to where it should read, Mr. Parrish stated that if he were subpoenaed, he would simply answer the questions truthfully. He would not be an attorney. And Supervisor Smith asked, then why didn't you do that? And I was thinking that she was directing that question toward Mr. Frazier, but when Mr. Frazier stated you have that opportunity, it indicates that she was directing that statement toward me. Is that true?
That's correct, and I looked at you when I said that.
Okay, I wasn't looking. So what I don't understand is, if I weren't subpoenaed, how would I have the opportunity to take a stand, which I'm really looking forward to doing. But I'm just wondering if there's any purpose to that statement.
Sure, there's a purpose to that statement. We've been involved in a legal suit for years on technicalities that's been continually kicked down the road because you haven't done exactly what you were asking Mr. Frazier to do.
I don't quite understand that, but that's I feel it's fine. So yeah, I haven't been subpoenaed by your side yet.
No, you're actually a party to the suit.
Looking forward to it. So the other one is, it says in here somewhere that there was a consensus about going into closed session, and I don't remember it that way. I remember it was left that when it comes to evaluations of employees, that we were going to leave that open, that we weren't necessarily opposed to going into closed session, we weren't necessarily in favor of it, but there was, in my opinion, not a consensus that we were going to go into closed session. But so that's all I have.
What page is that on?
No, I read the thing.
It's the second to last page. The very last sentence of the section under closed meeting.
So what would your suggested rewording of that sentence be, Mr. Parrish?
It says, after a short discussion, the board came into consensus to complete, which we did, and then I would put a period after the forms. Short discussion, the board came to consensus to complete the employee evaluation forms, which I have right here. I think the process is we give it to the chairman. I'm just going to do that right now.
You never elaborated on what the process was going to be, that's the whole problem.
I thought that we talked about the fact that we were going to fill out the forms first and get it to the chairman like we did last year, and then he takes it to the two employees that are in question. And that's what we did last year, and in my recollection, that's what we talked about doing again this year.
Last year, we went into closed session, and that's going to be.
I don't have an issue with the change per se.
So we'll just put a period after forms.
If there aren't other changes, then we can make a motion for those.
So I just want to clarify that the motion is to make this change, but not the previous change that we had discussed, which I think accurately reflected the action.
I don't know what the motion is.
Yes,
Yeah, that's fine.
then I'll second.
Okay, I'll put that form of a motion that the only change would be put a period in after evaluation forms and delete the rest of the sentence.
And I'll still second.
Motion made and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no.
Mr. Chairman, I need to abstain, I was not here last month. Abstaining from voting on minutes.
That brings you to what was K3.
That was K3, that was the,
Payment claimed by Officer Kerman.
Mr. Chairman, member of the board, I'm going to recuse myself and leave during this part of the discussion. Because there is an appearance that I have a conflict of interest with the Officer Kermit, during the case this morning. I'll submit something in writing to be attached to the minutes so that there's no question as to the reason why I'm recusing myself. I will.
So the information that's included in the packet from Officer Kerman submitted a claim to the Board of Supervisors dated May 10th for payment of legal fees with reference to the Code of Virginia Section 15.2.1245 and 15.2.15.20. County Attorney then provided a memorandum to the Board of Supervisors regarding Officer Kerman's claim on May 29th, explaining to the Board why the claim was not proper form. Officer Kerman submitted an amended claim dated June 6, 2019 to the Board of Supervisors seeking to resolve the deficiencies noted by County Attorney Goff in his memorandum to the Board, which memo apparently was forwarded on to Officer Kerman. The County Attorney then sent notice to Officer Kerman dated June 21 advising them that their claim for payment would be heard by the Board on August 5th at this meeting. The various letters that I've referenced are attached to the agenda, and at this point, Board can hear from Officer Kerman if it's your desire. Representative of Officer Kerman.
Yes. Thank you. Should I approach? Good afternoon. My name is Theodora Stringham, and I'm an attorney with the law firm of Officer Kerman. We represent Supervisor Ronald Frazier. Pursuant to Virginia Code 15.2, 1245, and 15.2, 1520, Mr. Frazier is requesting coverage of his fees, as you noted, as part of the Bragg versus Board of Supervisors lawsuits. As you can see, Mr. Frazier left the room given his potential conflict of interest regarding voting on this particular request. In this case, Mr. Goff, as county attorney, is conflicted with representation of Mr. Frazier in the Bragg case, which has led Mr. Frazier to seek his own independent counsel, which is the law firm of Officer Kerman. Even though Mr. Frazier is a member of the Board of Supervisors, he was personally served with subpoenas as part of the Bragg lawsuit from Art Goff as county attorney in this matter. The Board of Supervisors of Rappahannock County are a named party in the Bragg case, and Mr. Frazier, again, is part of the Board of Supervisors. Mr. Frazier was further specifically told by Mr. Goff that he would not be represented by the county attorney despite his membership to the board. Under Virginia Code 15.2, 1520, in any legal proceeding to which the governing body or any member thereof or any of the foregoing named persons may be defended when such proceeding is instituted against it or them by virtue of any actions in furtherance of their duties in serving the locality or a political subdivision as its governing body, all costs and expenses of such proceedings so defended shall be charged against the treasury of the locality. And what I've done there, if you're referencing 15.2, 1520, skip around a bit, but what that particular statute says is that for actions undertaken in an officer such as Mr. Frazier as a member of the Board of Supervisors' official duties, they should have representation and therefore have, and if necessary, have those fees paid. In Mr. Frazier's case, his actions in the Bragg case, again Bragg 1, were in furtherance of his duties as a supervisor. This was directly referenced by the Supreme Court of Virginia. Mr. Frazier's acknowledgement, as referred to in the Bragg 1 opinion, was consistent with FOIA, or the Freedom of Information Act law. Mr. Frazier needs legal representation to respond to the subpoenas and the request for a deposition that Mr. Goff and the county attorney have asked of him. It is unreasonable for him to be expected to represent himself when sophisticated attorneys such as Mr. Goff are making legal requests of him in the form of subpoenas. The board has previously paid one invoice associated with Mr. Frazier's representation. Mr. Frazier's request today is that the totality of the invoices, totaling approximately $19,000, are paid consistent with the code, and we respectfully request that you grant this request and therefore approve the invoice payment today. Thank you.
So why, I'm just curious, why would somebody need representation for a subpoena?
So a subpoena is a document, a request on behalf of a party or an individual. And in this case, what one puts forward is a legal matter. And Mr. Frazier, as a member of the Board of Supervisors, has been served with a subpoena by the board's counsel. And therefore, in order to determine what officially legally is responsive and therefore should be submitted consistent with his rights, he needs counsel. And that's what he's in fact done, because the board's counsel has told him that they would not represent him.
All right.
So Ms. Stringham,
Yes, sir.
what you have there in your arms, is there a contract there between Offutt Kerman and the Board of Supervisors in Rappahannock County? In other words,
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
in other words, did the board, as a majority, employ Offutt Kerman to perform this legal work?
So if you're asking what the relationship between us, with Offutt Kerman and Mr. Frazier, it's that of attorney-clients. I can't speak to what Mr. Frazier has shared with the board. I know Mr. Frazier did bring to the board's attention that because he did not have representation associated with the subpoenas, he would need to seek counsel. I'm not privy to the board's discussion of that particular matter as a matter of its business. However, Offutt Kerman's client is Mr. Frazier.
Right, so, in other words, this board didn't vote as a majority to authorize Offutt Kerman to act as Mr. Frazier's counsel. Mr. Frazier contracted with you separately.
I hear that's what you're saying, and what I've said is I'm not quite sure what this board has voted on previously. I know what's before you today is a request to have coverage of the legal invoices associated with Mr. Frazier's representation, which was necessary because the board's representation wouldn't be provided to him. So I think you're asking me about what's been voted on previously, and I can't speak to that.
Okay, well, I can tell you that this board has never, as a majority, voted to contract with Offutt Kerman to pay its legal bills. Now, I agree with you that Mr. Frazier is certainly due legal representation. There's no question there, and that certainly is his discretion. But you know, if he wants to pay you independently because he's a defendant, or he's not a defendant in this case, then that's certainly his prerogative to do so. But we're bound by the taxpayers to, as a board, under majority vote, to decide how the taxpayers' money is spent. And one of us can't bind this board, through deciding that we want to contract with anybody in this gallery. I mean, there's a gentleman that's sitting kind of behind you to the right there who raises lambs here. And if he's having a very bad year, I might say I think we should stroke him a $10,000 check out of the treasury of Rappahannock County. I guess by what you're arguing, I could probably go ahead and do that because that's an agreement that I could make because I'm an individual on this board and I can bind the board to do that.
May I speak? Yes, I respectfully disagree. In the case of the lambs, which all due respect to the gentleman, I'm not privy to his business. What I am privy to is the Code of Virginia, which specifically provides that officials such as yourself or others carrying out acts in the furtherance of their duties, like Mr. Frazier was doing, should in fact have representation and shall have funding for that representation. So I hear what you're saying about binding the board without further support. And what is I'm telling you, or representing to you, sir, what the support is the code itself. 15.2, 1520 speaks to that directly because, again, Mr. Frazier was acting in his official capacity and in furtherance of his duties.
But doesn't the code go on to say that this board can't bind itself to any contract unless it's so decided by a majority of the board? In other words, you're kind of arguing sort of the half of the code there that fits your description. I mean, that's in Mr. Goff's response to Offutt Kerman, I believe, as to why this board doesn't feel that it needs to pay Mr. Frazier's legal bills.
Well, sir, the essence of this code section we represent to you is that officials such as Mr. Frazier acting in the course of their duties shall have representation. Mr. Frazier has attempted to seek to have representation and to resolve this matter promptly in the most direct way possible. Obviously, it's not been resolved yet, and therefore fees continue to accrue, and which is why we're asking that a resolution is brought to this matter today and that approval is given so that, again, fees don't need to continue to accrue. That's why I'm before you today.
Appreciate that. We got a copy of the bill, and the services are all blocked out, but the dates and the hours are in here, and so what I know about a subpoena is a really simple process, right? You sit down and stand, and you basically answer the questions. That's it. But meanwhile, I think the reason the bill is so large is that I presume these charges are for phone calls. I mean, you got the 25th and 28th of February, and then in March you got the 4th, the 6th, the 7th, the 8th, the 11th, the 12th, the 13th, the 14th, the 19th, and it goes on like that. He's calling you guys every day. Yet the services are blocked out. So what is so complicated about a subpoena? You know, guiding through a subpoena that would cause, you know, daily phone calls and daily charges.
Well, I think you're sort of reading from an excerpt of the invoices, and they are blacked out for a specific reason. It's to protect the attorney-client privilege. And to disclose that information could constitute a possible waiver. What we've proffered to the board through our correspondence is that the discussions were relating to, in a general matter, the subpoenas. Now, you've read from March. As of December 2018, there was a subpoena issued, and then leading up to March 15th, there was discussion of an additional subpoena being issued, and then actually another subpoena being issued. And in terms of what you're saying, what is the complicated question? I believe you raised that earlier. The subpoena is a significant document because it requests information of Mr. Frazier and anyone that they must swear is responsive and does not disclose or waive any privileges such as the legislative immunity privilege, attorney-client privilege, anything of that nature.
So it's written material that goes back and forth in a subpoena?
Well, what's been issued to Mr. Frazier is a subpoena ducis tecum, which is generally relating to written material. That's what was requested of it. That being said, there was discussion from Mr. Golf that a deposition could occur. And so in preparation for that as well, communications, without going into the details with them, may have related to the deposition, which is another legal mechanism like the subpoena.
All right, thank you for clearing that up.
Yes, sir.
Is Mr. Frazier a defendant in this case?
Mr. Frazier is part of the Board of Supervisors of Rappahannock County, which is a named defendant in this case. The counsel for the Board of Supervisors of Rappahannock has said that Mr. Frazier does not have representation with him, and therefore, and subsequently also been told you must respond to subpoenas even though you're a member of this party of Board of Supervisors. And so he most certainly is part of the Brad 1 case, and he therefore still needs representation, particularly because, again, subpoenas were issued to him that he must therefore respond to, and as I mentioned to Supervisor Parrish, that's a legal mechanism that must be responded to, as you highlighted, sir, in a prudent manner. So yes, he is a defendant in the case as part of the Board of Supervisors of Rappahannock County.
Didn't he already claim that he accepted guilt and opted out of the Brad 1 case?
I don't believe so. No, I think that's incorrect, and that's not what I'm here to speak to today. What I'm here to speak to today is that under the statute, Mr. Frazier is entitled to legal representation. I will say that if it seems like you're getting into some of the details of the Brad 1 case, my understanding of that case is that the Supreme Court of Virginia acknowledged Mr. Frazier's acknowledgement as proper and consistent with FOIA law. So you're characterizing it as guilt. I'll defer to the Supreme Court on that, in that it wasn't any form of guilt, it was what needed to be done.
Did I get that wrong? Was that this Brad 1 in which Mr. Frazier said that he was accepted the responsibility that he created a FOIA violation?
You're right, Mr. President.
Sure.
Yeah. What he did was file this document called the acknowledgement, in which he decided to change his certifications from the certification that the exemptions for the closed meeting were legitimate and were followed in the 5 meetings that are the subject of Brad 1. He changed his vote to decertify that. And then the acknowledgement was provided as part of the good cause showing to get on the court's docket initially for the expedited injunction hearing, and then later as support for the first Bragg petition, which was the showing of good cause. What the Supreme Court said was that the acknowledgement, even though it had contained no jurat, wasn't sworn to, was sufficient good cause showing, and that the circuit court judge erred in dismissing the case on that basis. It didn't address the merits of anything that was said. But yes, Mr. Frazier decided to remember the letter that council sent to all the members of the board saying that you could be penalized up to $22,000 if you didn't change your certifications. Well, Mr. Frazier took advantage of that offer from Mr. Connick, the petitioner's counsel, and got out of the suit and therefore was not named. Originally in the draft petition, he was a named defendant. When he filed the acknowledgement, then Mr. Connick did not name him as a defendant in Bragg 1.
If I may, sir, just respectfully disagree. It seems like counsel is speculating as to what Mr. Frazier's intentions were and perhaps implying that there was some form of malfeasance. What Mr. Frazier was intending to do and has represented that he's intended to do is to comply with FOIA law. So any indication to the contrary is, I think, purely speculation. There's nothing on the record that has to do with $22,000. I'm not privy to that, and I would disagree with any painting of my client that makes it seem like he was doing something improper when he was solely seeking to comply with FOIA law.
If I may, Ms. Trennan, I don't intend to impugn your client's reputation or what he did at all. I'm just factually reciting what happened. I can represent to you as a member of the court, officer of the court, that what I just said was precisely factually correct. A letter that was in red ink at the top, and bold letters saying, for settlement purposes only, confidential, not admissible for any purposes, was sent to each member of the Board of Supervisors stating that they had violated FOIA's closed meeting requirements, and that if found guilty or found responsible, that they could each individually face up to $22,000 in civil fines for a knowing and willful violation of the act. That was sent out, and I don't recall the exact date, but I believe it was in somewhere around September 15th of 2016, and not copied to then counsel for the board, Mr. Libby. That was also a document that was actually received in evidence in the case and is in evidence now in the Bragg 1 case. It's part of the motion creating an order that was agreed to by counsel for Ms. Bragg.
I disagree, but I hear what you're saying in terms of the conclusions and the facts as you're characterizing them. What I would put on the record is that Mr. Frazier was seeking to comply with FOIA law.
Well, that's
actually not what we're talking about here today. We're
Right.
going to be talking
Thank you.
about the invoice in front of us.
Yes, ma'am.
Especially when we're being charged by the hour for it. So just to get us back on track, I don't really have any questions, but I do appreciate your coming out to speak to us today.
Thank you, and thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If we have any discussion or want to take any action on this matter at this point?
I know, Mr. Dalton, you got any more clarification on this, or?
the memorandum that I sent to each member of the board, I think fairly construes 1520. It is my opinion, and I can speak for Mr. Luke as well, that in order to qualify for payment of legal fees under that particular statute, one's got to be a defendant in the proceeding. As to what they're claiming that I said I wasn't going to represent Mr. Frazier, what I told him was that I don't represent him individually. Okay, I only represent the board and those individual members who the board told me to represent. Mr. Welch, yourself, Mr. Bennett, and Mr. Lozinski, because you were named as individual defendants in that lawsuit. The issue of a subpoena ducis tecum says, hand over any documents that you may have had correspondence with counsel for the petitioner, and hand over any documents that are relevant, contain facts related to the claims in the second amended petition. It's a standard thing that goes on in a lawsuit. If a person's a witness, you're going to get them tied down. Mr. Frazier's response was, I don't have anything that's responsive that's not covered by legislative privilege or legislative immunity privilege. Fine. We've done our job for this board. We know that there's no document coming into evidence in trial that would have information that was damaging to our defense. So that's all there is to it. And as to the claim part, the Code of Virginia itself requires that these bills be itemized. Okay, and that's in several places in the code. In fact, it's in the county attorney code as well. It says I've got to submit itemized bills if I'm not salaried, which I usually do, and which Mr. Luke does, and which the firm representing you, Walker Jones, submits very detailed itemized accounts for every minute that they're charging. And Mr. Lozinski brought up a point that I think bears repeating, and that is that there was never any contract between this board and Offutt Kerman. They didn't come in and ask. You weren't given an opportunity to decide whether their rates were reasonable, or the scope of their services, or the amount of services. None of that was before this board. Yet now you're asked to pay a bill which you had no prior approval of.
So, this has come up a couple of times before. I mean, the first time it was only $200, and I actually ought to pay that out of my own pocket, Mr. Frazier. And then the second time it came up, it was $559. And at that time, I wasn't really cognizant of the fact, or thinking about the fact that, yes, like Mr. Lozinski said, yes, the board has to approve these kind of payments ahead of time. In other words, the process should have been to come to the board, ask permission to get an outside counsel, and then we would be obligated to pay. And that had not happened, and I voted, I'm one of the ones that voted to pay $595, and I apologize to the public for that. I guess in a way irresponsible of me, and I'm sorry that I voted that way. But anyway, I know better now. Thank you.
It sounds like we need a decision here about how to handle these bills that are presented before us. It does come down, for me, to this board not having a contract with Offutt Kerman, not even being presented an opportunity to review the legal expenses or legal, whether it's the hourly rate or whether what the firm is being contracted to do. We just can't. I mean, we spend a lot of time and effort going over contracts, doing competitive bids, selecting vendors, and trying to get the best possible rates, whether they're legal or whether they're building and grounds for our taxpayers. And I just think that it should have been gone about in the right way. I guess whether or not those bills ultimately get paid may end up in a court of law, but it just doesn't pass the first hurdle of the fact that this board, which represents the taxpayers, did not have an opportunity to contract with Offutt Kerman or to see what Offutt Kerman was proposing to offer in the way of services. So I'm going to make the motion that the board not pay the outstanding bills for Offutt Kerman for the reasons laid out by the county attorney in his memo dated May 29th, 2019.
I feel for Mr. Frazier, but I'm going to have to second that.
And I just want to say, for the purposes of discussion, that we're basing this vote on the opinion of an attorney whom I have a lot of respect for, Mr. Goff, but that has clearly chosen that he represents the named parties and is the issuer of the subpoena that is the reason these fees were incurred, only serves to illustrate what a mess this is. And I just wonder at what point we're going to start cleaning up our mess. I'm sure this will be voted through today. It's not what I would have wanted. I would like to, for the record, go back and see if we couldn't work out something with Officer Kerman that would result in lower fees and representation from Mr. Frazier going forward. I'd like to seek a solution. I think this vote will clearly only lead to a bigger mess, but I'm quite sure that's where we're headed. Thank you.
Motion made and second. Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Pardon?
Those opposed?
Those opposed?
Nay.
All right.
To find Mr. Frazier. Yes, please. Officer Blaine is going to do. You can track down Mr.
Just waiting for Ron.
Yeah.
All right. Approval of the minutes.
Everything we've done with this.
We're on public.
Next item on the agenda is public comment. Anyone wishing to desire to speak may do so. Please raise your hand and be recognized. When recognized, state your name and district that you're in. Direct your comments to the board and I declare public comment open. You want to use the microphone? Yes.
Sheila Dwyer, Hampton District. I would like to add some levity to the discussion here. Our comprehensive plan calls for a dual goals. It's agriculture and tourism, and I think that's very important to our county. I went to a Business of Rap meeting last week, and one of the ladies there was from the cottage corridors, like corridor something, anyway, a business. And she said when she has clients who come through here, she lets them know that there's spotty cell service, and she gives them a map. She probably gives them this map, Businesses of Rap, to sort of spread the word and be a welcoming, helpful hand. And Sandra at the Visitor Center does the same thing. She actually gives out the map of Rappahannock, so you can actually plot where you're going if your cell phone gives out. So 2 meetings ago, we were talking about the aesthetics of the cell towers and how ugly they were, especially the latest one that turned out with that horrible blue. And I heard someone say several months ago that even a high school kid with computer savvy could have made some kind of a visual subjecting that pole before it was built to the background in which it was going to be, to sort of give a visual as to what it was going to look like. And there were people here at the last meeting I was, and they were talking about the viewscape and how these things just cause a whole lot of ugliness in our county. Now, the importance of cell phones and internet is extremely important. We've had a broadband committee going on for quite a couple of years now. So I had said that on a trip, I had seen cell towers look like trees. And Mr. Parrish had sort of wondered what they looked like and said they were horrible. So on a trip in June, I was on another road. They must be in New Jersey. But anyway, I took pictures. And so for this very first one, I'm going to pass it around to y'all. You can look at that and you can see that there are green trees there, okay? So it looks green trees. So if you think about it, if something like this is it closer. It's a green tree-like thing, but if you put it against our background of our forest and everything, it wouldn't be quite as blatantly ugly as some of the stuff that's being proposed. Now, we have the silos around here. I don't know how much objection there were from cell companies to put it up, but if anybody were to say, oh, we can't do that, we'll tell them their requirement is putting this up as opposed to that blue thing, or even if that thing had been painted brown, it would have been different. It would have blended better with the environment, and these things do. So I would propose this kind of conversation.
You do know we already have one of those, don't you?
I've heard it, I haven't found it yet. It must be blending in. Seven.
It must be, but we do have one.
Anyone else care to speak? Anyone else? Clear public comment closed. About our school, Dr.
Good afternoon from your Panther family. We are T-minus 9 days until our kiddos grace our hallways once again. We are ready to begin what is sure to be the best school year ever. Very excited. Our new fall coaches have signed on and have started tryouts last week with other sports beginning next week. So we're already seeing some kids come out to that. We've also been scrambling to get our renovation projects completed in time for the start of school. We're going to bump right up against that deadline, but it's all going to be done, and you will not believe the transformation, especially at the elementary school. Thank you so much to the supervisors for approving our facilities projects money in the PAYGO account and working with us to get done that 5-year capital improvement plan. We're well on our way, and we're making incredible progress. Additionally, thanks to the efforts of RAPFLOW with support from Headwaters, Piedmont Environmental Council, Krebser Fund for Rappahannock County, Northern Piedmont Community Foundation through the Likes Fund, Commit to Be Fit, and the Path Foundation, our courtyard project has been completed in loving memory of Beverly Hunter. We hope you will come out to a special ribbon cutting ceremony on August 13th at 6 p.m. Beginning right outside the elementary school portico. We wish to show you in the community what great collaboration can accomplish when we work together. You'll be so proud of our little school, and now it looks the way that we feel. We hope you'll come out for that. The regularly scheduled school board meeting will take place at 6:30 p.m. at the elementary school that day, following the ribbon cutting ceremony. We have changed that location to coincide with the ceremony, and after last week's very informative and scintillating FOIA training, I might add, thank you very much for hosting that. We can say with confidence it was probably noticed and advertised. On July 22nd through August 1st, we were happy to collaborate with Sheriff Connie Compton to offer a 2-week summer swim camp at the wharf. This is something she and I have been talking about for quite some time, and we hope to expand it this year, hopefully building a leveled program similar to the Red Cross Swim program. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it allows children of all ages to complete different levels of ability, culminating in passing all the way through lifeguard certification. So we hope that we can build this. The wharf has been very cooperative and is interested in exploring this with us in coming months, so stay tuned for that. New teachers began orientation today, so we welcome them today. All staff come back on Wednesday, August 7th, for our convocations and professional development. 8th grade orientation is Thursday, August 8th at 6 p.m. Monday, August 12th is meet the teacher from 1 to 4 and 5 to 7. And the first day of school is Wednesday, August 14th already. Where did summer go? I've also provided Mr. Curry a summary of all our updates to school board policy that we made over the summer and all those regulations and resolutions. And we'll continue to do this as we consider any policy changes. That way, many of which are simple revisions that we get from VSBA policy based on updated legislation and things that the General Assembly does. But please note that these items and all these updates are recorded and are uploaded to the school board docs as well every month, which is readily accessible at rappahannockschools.us under the school board tab. So you can see that at any time, and if you have questions, you can always ask, of course. I look forward to all we will accomplish this year, and thank you so much, as always, for your dedication and support for our schools. We really appreciate it. Do you have any questions for me?
I'll say Dr. Grimsley provided a hard copy for remarks, and included in that hard copy, which is on board docs, are links to the policies that she noted. Shortcut to their board docs, if you will, would probably be.
Thank you for waiting.
Thank you. Employee recognition.
I guess, board members, we missed one member of the board at the last meeting, according to Ms. May's records, and I wanted to follow up at this meeting to provide that recognition. And that is to Roger Welch for being with the county for 20 years. He has not received his PIN yet or his certificate. Last month, Mr. Welch went through and signed certificates, but it wasn't appropriate for him to sign his own certificate. So the other 4 board members signed a certificate for you. So your 20-year PIN and your certificate.
It's only through longevity that I, very nice. Wow. Treasury report. Terry?
Well, last month I told you because of your $1.3 million check run, we would likely see a dip in the cash. And as it turns out, the actual cash is higher at this point than it was the same time last year. If you dig into the information provided by the Treasurer, you'll see that where RAP was high, the schools was low, and that's largely because the debt service that wasn't paid by the schools this year, which was paid last year. There were 2 issuances that were paid by the schools last year, so that netted out. So you can see on the very far left side of that cash graph, which is included in the packet, that we're entering FY20 in a better cash position than we have in the last several years. We'll continue to remind you to calculate that there are many capital dollars that you identified from your fund balance for several projects that have been delayed, most significantly the radio system, regional radio system, and those payouts will occur this year. So we will spend down some of that cash this year. Nothing else of significance to add. Happy to answer any questions.
I think that some of these expenditures, like for the regional jail, they're quarterly and they're front-loaded, and
Yes.
they'll point it out as,
As you look through the details, or even the summary expenditures, you'll see some are 25%, some even 50%. And those are items that are paid either quarterly or semi-annually. I didn't see anything in those that caused me concern.
thank you.
Oh, what's going on with the generators? I see there's a portable generator in front of the jail. Are we running that?
Yes, and I can speak to that now or during my update.
Probably not.
There aren't any payments in this check run for it.
Okay.
If there's nothing else, we can move on to the next item, which is purchase award after the fact. I told you several months ago that we had pricing from ACB Environmental for Household Hazardous Waste Collection Day. It was very successful, and it turns out it was over $10,000. It was $12,683.95. So I'm asking you for award approval after the fact. Now, added a last sentence to this, we were just alerted a week and a half ago that some of our liquids contain PCBs. So we will be receiving additional invoice. I'm not sure what that is yet, but we will find out. Better that they were collected and disposed of properly rather than landing in a ditch or a landfill. So I would ask the board is inclined to authorize this purchase after the fact. We can clean up our records because technically you're supposed to approve items over $10,000.
Like the legal bill that was here a little while ago.
Correct.
That could have also been done after the fact.
Good enough.
I'm sorry, what does that have to do with this?
Just making a correlation
That it's over $10,000?
that it could have been addressed after the fact.
Well, this is after the fact because we already paid it.
Correct.
I see.
Well, we didn't, it's in this the AP that we're about to consider. You're about to consider.
I'll make a motion that we pay this invoice.
And I provide this to you for full transparency. These are the rules that we're supposed to follow, and I'm attempting to follow them.
Thanks. I'll second it.
Motion made and second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Next item.
Next is your accounts payable. Included in the accounts payable is two payments to Walker Jones in the total amount of $923.75 for services rendered related to Grant 1, and as such, it would be appropriate for board members to read disclosure statement, or may be appropriate. We have been prepared them. Here, not there's another one. Before discussing the voting.
I'll go ahead. Pursuant to the Code of Virginia, Section 2.2-3115H, as a Board of Supervisors member, I may have a personal interest related to the approval of the accounts payable process that includes consideration of the payment to Walker Jones, which firm provides legal counsel related to the Bragg 1 case. The nature of my potential personal interest is the fact that the main firm is providing for my legal defense as an individual and member of the Board of Supervisors. I certify that my involvement in action is as a group of 3 or more members of the Board of Supervisors which are affected by the transaction, and that I am able to participate in the transaction fairly, objectively, and in the public interest.
Pursuant to the Code of Virginia, Section 2.2-3115H, as a member of the Board of Supervisors, I may have a personal interest related to the approval of the accounts payable process that includes consideration of payment to Walker Jones or Officer Herman which firm provides legal counsel related to the Bragg case. The nature of my potential personal interest is the fact that the named firm is providing for my legal defense as a member of the Board of Supervisors. I certify that my involvement in action is as a group of 3 or more members of the Board of Supervisors which are affected by the transaction, that I am able to participate in the transaction fairly, objectively, and in the public interest.
Pursuant to the Code of Virginia, Section 2.2-3115.h, as a Board of Supervisors member, I may have a personal interest related to the approval of the accounts payable process that includes consideration of a payment to Walker Jones, which firm provides legal counsel related to the Bragg 1 case. The nature of my potential personal interest is the fact that the named firm is providing for my legal defense as an individual and a member of the Board of Supervisors. I certify that my involvement in action is as a group of 3 or more members of the Board of Supervisors which are affected by the transaction, and that I am able to participate in the transaction fairly, objectively, and in the public interest.
Pursuant to the Code of Virginia, Section 2.2-3115H, as a Board of Supervisors member, I may have a personal interest related to the approval of the accounts payable process that includes consideration of a payment to Walker Jones, which firm provides legal counsel related to the Bragg 1 case. The nature of my potential personal interest is the fact that the named firm is providing legal defense for members of the Board of Supervisors. I certify that my involvement in action is a group of 3 or more members of the Board of Supervisors which are affected by the transaction, that I am able to participate in the transaction fairly, objectively, and in the public interest.
Pursuant to the Code of Virginia, Section 2.2-3115.h, as a Board of Supervisors member, I may have a personal interest related to the approval of the accounts payable process that includes consideration of a payment to Walker Jones. His firm provides legal counsel to the Bragg 1 case. The nature of my potential personal interest is the fact that the named firm is providing for my legal defense as an individual and as a member of the Board of Supervisors. I certify that my involvement in action is as a group of 3 or more members of the Board of Supervisors which are affected by the transaction, and that I am able to participate in the transaction fairly, objectively, and in the public interest.
The accounts payable, there are 3 attached, 2 mid-month, one for $16,257.77, one for $1,725. Those were on July 15 and 16. The second has a separate approval, one-time approval for your payment of invoice policy. This is an invoice for the sheriff that missed the cutoff for the preceding month and was going to accrue late charges if it wasn't paid early. And then last August 5th, 2019, for a total of $286,459.18. $286,459.18.
If nobody has any questions, I'd make a motion that we pay these as presented.
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor say aye. All opposed, nay. Next item.
Next item is a supplemental appropriation request from the sheriff. It's an insurance claim. It's now Virginia Risk Sharing Association, which used to be BML liability, for vehicle versus deer collision, $1,796.50, being appropriated to the vehicle repair loan, which requires your approval.
Make the motion to approve.
Motion made and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
Next item on your agenda is just a recitation of the documents that I've provided in the past for your contingency budget process, showing that we started a new fiscal year. The starting balance is $100,000, and there are no current requests for use of contingency. No action required.
Appointment. We have any appointments?
I'm wondering why we have representatives from Social Services and CSB here, and they're not on the agenda, so
We talked like back in June, remember, and I was supposed to go on for the August because I was too late for the July.
there you go. So perhaps the board may want to amend the agenda to provide time to Social Services CSB to tell us about the LINK program.
I was trying to see where I fit in. I was like, where exactly is he putting me?
You can blame the clerk.
Would this be a presentation from the Community Services Board?
It's from the Social Services Department. CSB is participating in the LINK program.
Right.
So it is a presentation.
So we could make that H and then bump everything else down a letter? I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
What's your hourly rate?
It's all good.
Motion made, second.
And I'll apologize again.
It's okay. I actually forgot to bury it till last night. I was looking at my phone. I'm like, oh, and I 9:45.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
And I will start off with Miss Regina Bellamy Mason is our LINK worker who has joined the department with us July 1.
Well,
She's actually an employee of Mr. McGrath's Community Services Board, and we are working with the Community Services Board to have this program in Rappahannock, and it's funded through our Comprehensive Services Act. And Regina is amazing so far in her short time with us, just a little over a month, working with our substance abusing parents. She works and provides intensive case management with these parents, linking them, hence the name LINK, with all their resources, their programs, parenting, making sure that they're getting to the appointments, making sure that they're going to their meetings, and it's working great. She has engaged with some of my toughest parents that I tried for years as a worker to engage in substance abuse treatment to no avail. And he is fully engaged and making progress. So we're hoping to return his two children to him sometime in the near future, which we want our numbers to go down. And LINK works hand in hand with Families First legislation, which is going live in October. And hopefully, if we get ready with all that, and LINK will focus on substance abuse prevention, treatment, in-home, and keeping families together as opposed to the trauma that imposes on children by taking them out of their families of origin. So we're excited to have Regina on board. Feel free to come by and talk to her and ask her questions, or Mr. Jim will tell you all about it. We were second, right, in the area to go up. Fall Carriers had this program for 3 years, and it was very successful. So we joined in, and now Culpeper is getting ready to go live, right?
Culpeper and Orange just hired a LINK coordinator.
And this is a win-win. It's much better on the human side, and it's more cost-effective on the financial side. So it's really great when those two can come together.
We're so focused on our kids and making sure that they're safe and they're getting all the services that they need and everything is happening, and writing foster care plans and just giving parents a list to say, you need to, you need to, you need to. Sometimes we lose focus of working with the parents, and because we're so focused on the kids, Regina is kind of that middle person connecting us with the parents, and she's working that list with them. Because there is that kind of us versus them initially with the foster care system. We did take their children from them. So she kind of bridges that and makes it more appealable and engages those parents back in. Okay. Any questions?
Any other just general DSS updates? Trying to reach back to the email conversation we had.
29. We had 29 children as of last week. So unfortunately, our numbers are not going down. They are still going up. Substance abuse is still alive and well in Rappahannock County. Violence is definitely a hot topic right now. We are hoping to wrap up 3 adoptions here very soon, so that'll bring us down to 26, and hopefully return a child to relative custody next week, so that'll help bring it down a little bit as well.
Any plans for your next, as a Pride?
Foster parent training?
Yes.
We are having a meet and greet towards the end of September. We haven't set that date yet. With the kickoff for foster parent training in October, we'll be getting out all the marketing materials for you to pass out to all your friends and help us recruit more foster families. We weren't successful with the June training. There was just so much going on with school getting out and vacations. We just didn't have enough participants for June, so we'll be back at it in October. We do have 7 fully approved foster families right now, and 1 that has decided to take a hiatus for now.
And how many were there last year at this time?
1 that wasn't child specific. The other ones had gone through the training and the approval process to take in a child within their family.
Are those all for long-term foster placements, so to speak, quote-unquote, long-term?
Some of them.
Or are they transition, short-term?
Some of them are emergency or respite only. Some of them are foster to adopt long-term. But we do have some that are just willing to provide that day or 2 transition until we can find a more permanent situation for a child, which helps. Definitely helped 2 weeks ago at 3 o'clock in the morning. We were able to put children in a home in the middle of the morning at wee hours instead of keeping them in the office until regular business opened. It was nice that they could go get into bed after a very traumatic night.
Well, I enjoyed the article in the newspaper. It was very informative and it was very well done. This Families First legislation, this is the legislation that actually can come back and monetarily penalize Rappahannock for not being able to, or because we can't place our foster children within the county.
It
Correct?
can, yes.
Okay.
The use of residential, the use of group homes primarily will be the reason for penalties. If we can justify the use of therapeutic foster homes, there won't be as much. But yes, there is a push to keep our kids local, and the biggest push is to keep them within their families. I think we're going to start to see more on the prevention side of the house, where we're working with families to keep them together and intact before we're removing a child, where that means we'll be providing intensive in-home services and protective orders to keep the kids in the homes first before we're taking them out, unless it's imminent risk to a child, and then keeping them in the county so that we can keep them connected to their community. And that's why we've been driving so hard since last fall to get those local homes here. Because we want our kids here, and yes, there is going to be financial penalties to it.
That's a win, not a lose. It's almost as good as winning.
Oh, we want to keep our kids, plus we want to keep them enrolled around in schools. That's very important. We need to keep that school enrollment up, so thank you.
I thank Jen for all of her assistance during budgeting, as well as being completely open, working together between administration and DSS, very helpful. We try to work together the best we can.
Yes. Gary has been wonderful to work with. He's taught me a lot about budgeting, things that I didn't quite understand either, so it's a learning curve. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. Councilor Jim.
Now we'll do appointments. The first item is a long-standing item for a vacancy on your Agricultural Enforcement Advisory Committee, District Advisory Committee. Remains one vacancy, and we this will come up again probably next year. I was just going through the cycle a couple months ago, so there's really no activity near term. So if you know of anybody who owns land in the county that is the only prerequisite, let them know that they're welcome to apply for that, and we'll probably meet once a year with the audience. Next are the two vacancies for the building committee. For the citizen positions, there is one applicant that submitted after we advertised in the newspaper. When the board considered this last meeting, decided to wait. I'm not sure if you want to take any action at this point.
My position doesn't change. There's the appearance of the conflict.
And if the board would like me to not carry forward that application for that reason, I'm happy to do that.
Let me ask you this, Mr. Curry. What's the status now if it's Wiley Wilson, isn't it? I know we have some consultants out there that are working diligently to get us reports about next steps.
Yes, and I imagine we may talk about this in the committee update, but they've completed their field work and we're now waiting for the report.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. Well, it's relevant to this, so I'm going to ask the question. Do we have a sense of when they're going to come back and report to the board?
They had a pretty detailed schedule, and I apologize, I don't recall what that is. It's on an earlier agenda, but I can certainly get back to you with it.
I mean, is there
pretty
any
compressed?
I know this is for getting into the building committee side of it, but is there any reason for the committee to be meeting until those reports come back, or are there other things coming up that we need to consider?
There are any number of building items that the committee may want to discuss and make a recommendation to the full board.
Is there anything outside of which you could just brief the board on, at our regular meetings here?
No, I don't think so. Of course, I have a strong background in facilities, and I think that helps us from that perspective, that between meetings, I'm usually able to keep up on those matters. And I've said before that it would hurt my feelings if the committee went right, but I will certainly participate if the board decides to continue to have one.
Well, I'm not necessarily in agreement with Mr. Frazier on the conflict of interest piece of this. We all have various things that we're involved with here that involve county facilities, but since there's nothing burning right now until, well, not literally, figuratively, until we get these reports, I'm happy to just table it or take it up later, and maybe getting these reports back in will get some people focused or interested on something that they might be able to actually sink their teeth into. So I would just take it up, revisiting it every month, and at such time, seeing if we really need it, and if so, we want to at least restaff it.
The next appointment is for the Public Safety Committee, very similar in that the board asked me to place an advertisement in the newspaper, which I did, resulted in one application. In the prior meeting, the board decided to hold off until a later time. I'm not sure what the board's going to do.
I don't recall that we had actually removed Jackie Estes from the position. He had not appeared at several consecutive meetings, but at the meeting after we initially had decided to advertise for this position, Mr. Estes did attend, and he indicated that he was still willing to serve and that the schedule for the rest of the year was agreeable to him. And he actually presented several very good ideas at the meeting. So it would be my preference for him to continue to serve in that capacity. I don't know that we necessarily need to take any action for him to do so.
I believe there was a vote. The
Vacate the position.
vacated position, you could reappoint him.
Well, since he did indicate his willingness to continue to serve and he has experience in doing so, I would make a motion to reappoint him to that position.
I'll second that.
And it's awkward the way that it happened, and I do apologize for that, but sometimes that's the way it shakes out.
Motion made and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay. Motion carried.
Next is really a status update for the Fire Levy Board. As you recall, when the board modified the charter in November of 2018, modified it such that the representatives for each district would be appointed by the individual board member. There have been several representatives from public safety community seeking a candidate for Wakefield. No names have come to the surface, so anybody knows of anybody in Wakefield who would like to serve on the Fire Levy Board, they should reach out to Mr. Welch, and Mr. Welch can consider their appropriateness for that and make an appointment outside of the board process. Lastly, here we go, Mr. Frazier. I did not point out at the beginning of the meeting that this was added after the initial release on Wednesday. I'm not sure if it technically needs to be adopted in or not, but the board may want to take action to that end. Ms. Sandra Maskus informed me of her resignation from the RCRFA. So I added it here just as an FYI.
So we need an applicant.
So if you want to add this to the agenda or consider it already added to the agenda, I will take direction from the board on how you may want to advertise for this vacancy, or if you want it advertised in the newspaper, which would take expenditure of funds. There may be enough interest out there.
Well, the third time is the charm, right? So maybe we should amend the agenda one more time to reflect the inclusion of the addendum under what is now item J5, appointments. To the RCRFA.
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
So that we can have a discussion and action on this item.
Motion made and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Carried.
So I'll welcome any feedback from the board as to how you like me to approach this.
Well, kind of going along with some of the conversations we've had recently about kind of keeping a running list of people, citizens that were interested in appointments. Do we have any names that didn't get appointed to this the last time that we did advertise it? Would you know that offhand? I'm going to put you on the spot.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of. I don't recall the list. I did provide to the board members a listing of all the appointments, not as part of the board packet, just so you can have that information. But that only includes who's appointed. In the past locality that I worked in, kept an open list of interests, so people could apply to a board bank at any time, express which committees they may be interested in representing, and then when a vacancy came up, they'd be on a short list that could be provided to board members to reach out and determine if they would be a good fit. We don't have that here. Don't know. That's something we want to do, but the Rules Committee is working through the policy for appointments, and we can take that into consideration in those discussions. But I definitely think there are some positions and appointments that make sense to be advertised in the paper. Planning Commission, things like that that are more time sensitive maybe. This is a very active group and it's really gathered a lot of steam. I suspect there would be grassroots interest without an ad, but I don't know.
The last time we appointed someone to this was in January when we appointed Steph Ritter.
Right.
And it just notes that one application has been received and is attached. So she was the only applicant when we took this up in January.
Mr. Cruz, though, to your point, you sit in these meetings, and does seem to be a tremendous amount of interest now in the community. So maybe announce at your next meeting, or just...
I will ask that it be added as an agenda item at the next meeting and see what that group would like to do as a course forward. If they feel like they can work with someone, or if they feel like we need to advertise.
And I'll just note that Ms. Meska's submitted her resignation effective basically after the next meeting of the authority, which is okay.
Since this is an authority, is there something in their authority regs that messages that process at all?
No, other than they have to be appointed by resolution, which we cleaned up the last couple of times.
Committee report. Fraser, Mr. Kuzinski. Building committee.
Well, the building committee, as we were discussing earlier, we haven't met because we don't have any more than the three of us, and that makes talking about anything at all difficult outside of a scheduled meeting. Actually, it makes it impossible. Difficult would be a violation. So, right now, we're just waiting for the Riley Wilson report to come in to the board. We could convene a meeting to look at that then, but I guess what we really should be doing as a committee, individual members, is to find 2 additional members to appoint.
This is probably a good place for Mr. Parrish's question about the generator.
Sure. As we discussed, I believe, the last meeting, the countywide power outage on June 13th revealed some issues here in our system. We have 2 generators, one that serves all of the buildings on this row of buildings here, and then a secondary generator that serves only certain circuits in the sheriff's office. Just in case the primary generator doesn't start, the secondary one will pick up those critical loads. On June 13th, neither generator ran. And it appears a surge took out both of them, and the primary generator was able to be fixed. The secondary generator was not able to be fixed. It's very old, and the entire controls failed. So I received a quote to repair the controls of around $6,000, I think it was. A replacement generator was around $20,000. Before taking that next step, I talked to the board at the last meeting about having an electrical engineer come in and analyze the entirety of the electrical system, identify any issues, any grounding issues, surge protection issues, and then in their recommendation, design ultimately corrective action, including a UPS, uninterruptible power supply for the critical sheriff's office circuits that serve dispatch instead of having individual little UPSs that you buy off the shelf. So that field work has occurred, and the engineer and I have discussed that. He's actually been to site a couple times. In discussing that, we expanded the scope slightly to talk about the secondary generator on should we replace it with a like-for-like 45 kW generator, or what would it take to do the full sheriff's office jail, relative in size. His analysis was that a 60 kW generator could do the full building as opposed to individual circuits, and so I've asked for some quotes to see. He thought it might be $2,000 or $3,000 difference for that. If that's the case, it would make it much easier to properly install and ground and protect the sheriff's office if we did that. So that's where I am in that. So now this is where I get to answering Mr. Parrish's question. Yes, we're renting that. However, I've submitted an insurance claim for the damage to the generator that includes the rental cost. So I've submitted to them, it will be at least 2 months, possibly more, that we'll be renting the generator as a backup to the primary, and we will hopefully get paid all the $1,000 deductible when it's all said and done for the rental, fix of the primary, and then the cost that it would take to repair the small generator if we were to repair a generator from the 90s. Not my recommendation.
I'm going to ask him to repeat that.
I was paying attention to the first thing.
You have some other projects ongoing also.
The county admin electrical work is complete. That's done. Have been working for quite a long time to get the signs fixed behind the buildings. I actually pressed the contractor to get me their information before the end of the fiscal year. And there was some miscommunication between their email and mine. I finally got them. It was so close to the end of the fiscal year that I couldn't get it done before the fiscal year, so then I set it in a different pile where it remains today. So that's, that's on me sitting there.
That's not the handicap parking, that's all done, right?
The striping is done, different contractor. The signage on the back of the buildings, on the sheriff's office, and then coming in from Mount Sam's Porter to invite people who need handicap accessible parking rather than a sign that says no unauthorized vehicles. That's the upgrade that's kind of pending.
Any timeline on that?
Yes. I can move it to the top of the pile.
Map that you hear, please.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah.
And there were
The roof on the circuit court clerk's office has recently been scraped and painted. That's done. And then HVAC, we worked through to a new contractor. We were using a firm out of Luray who couldn't be here when we needed him to be here. And so we beat the bushes to find another contractor who actually was doing work at the school, still does some work for the schools, but was employed by Honeywell and is very well versed in commercial, all kinds of commercial HVAC. He left Honeywell to form his own business and is sole proprietor now. We said, well, we'll give you a shot. We had a failure in the Commissioner of Revenue's office and gave him a shot to do that job. He did an excellent job. He's since been diagnosing all of our systems and pointing out some significant failures in maintenance over time and is fixing those issues one by one as we move through. So our expenditures are going to be a little high here in the near term to get our HVAC back where it should be. I did the library today, which was not surprisingly also well behind appropriate preventive maintenance.
Last question, telecom and fiber. Any update on anything going on with any of the tower and work and providers updates?
I'm told that T-Mobile is very close to moving on to Sperryville. And I know that because the tower owner contacted us to the zoning office and myself for an interpretation on whether the antennas needed to be painted sky blue, and which was the tower color, and the code says they need to blend with the tower, and so that was the response that we gave them. That it didn't necessarily have to be sky blue, but need to blend with the tower. So that pretty much says no to black, but if it blends with the tower, it's probably a light color. We suggested that fine. So they have to submit something to show in their zoning permit that it does that. I informed, I think, each of you individually just before the meeting that we did just receive in zoning the applications for the 2 towers along 522 for which there were balloon tests. And I don't know anything about those. I haven't seen the application, it just came in. Then we need to do a blend between building committee and broadband committee.
Might be.
And the administrator's update.
In the administrative update. If we had those all on the consent agenda.
Yeah. Broadband update. The committee did not meet in July. We have 2 forums that we'll be attending here. One coming up pretty quickly. I want to thank Margaret Bond for being here again today as a committee member, for standing in my absence last month. Margaret and Bill Dent will attend a broadband forum featuring Evan Feynman, who's the serving as Governor Northam's chief broadband advisor. It's going to be at the Path Foundation in Warrenton on August 19th from 2 until 3:30, and it's hosted by the Greater Piedmont Realtors. To learn more about Governor Northam's initiatives to spread broadband. Just this morning I saw a press release out of his office saying that Clark County got a VATI grant teaming with Comcast up at White Post, which is pretty rural here when we're talking about all of that. So we'll be certainly asking, I think Mr. Curry's already reached out to Comcast to find out more about that, why they haven't had a desire to partner with us here in Rappahannock yet. And we'll learn more on the 19th. Also on September the 5th down in Richmond, the Commonwealth is holding its Broadband Summit from 9:30 to 3:30. We'll send a couple of, I think Mr. Curry, I don't know if you're going to go down to that or not, but we're going to send a couple of committee members down to that. Obviously, any board members that have any interest in something like this, love to have you come. This is about grant programming and assistance opportunities, new technologies made possible with broadband, successful municipal industry partnerships, opportunities for expanded broadband access for school children, and how broadband enhances economic development opportunities across Virginia. So we'll be sending representatives to that. I would, person schedules, committee schedules permitting, possibly having a committee meeting in August, but we might push it to September so that we can attend this summit on the 5th and then decide how to proceed forward.
Yes, question. You mentioned that we're trying to find out why Comcast doesn't want to partner with the county or extend service in the county.
It's so there's something called a VATI. It's the Virginia Telecom Initiative. That's the grant program that the Commonwealth has put forward for localities to get grant money for broadband. And in order to apply for that, you have to have a private partner. In other words, the county would partner with Mr. Curry did this down in Gloucester County with Cox Communications. As I mentioned, Clark is doing this now with Comcast. Bedford got $1 million, and I can't remember who the provider was down there, but you can't apply for this money unless you've got a Shentel or a Comcast or a CenturyLink that's willing to go in with you. And so far, none of the above, even though they're in our county, have been willing to partner with us because it's money out of their pockets to bring broadband all the way to the household. And to date, there isn't, our understanding is there's no economies of scale there. There's not enough money in it for the providers to do it, unless I'm mistaken.
No, in the first round of the VATI, Gloucester was fortunate to partner with Cox and expand the Cox footprint. And basically there was a Cox investment in a state grant investment, no local dollars, that was able to accomplish that. And that looks to be the same model used by Clark, but my communications with Gloucester were that they failed to get a grant the second cycle because the cost efficiencies weren't there, $1 per household. So I'm not sure how Clark managed to get in, or if the state was just evening out the turf and giving one to Comcast was there and gave some to Cox earlier. But I did reach out to our Cox representatives and said, hey, why not us? We have some areas where it's on the fringe of what our agreement with them says that they have to do, which is 25 customers per service line mile. They need to connect those homes for us, according to our franchise agreement. So if we have areas that are close, then they should be financially viable if there's outside revenue coming into them from the state. So we really would like to work with them to identify those areas. And so I've asked before if they'd be willing to do it. It didn't get anywhere. And so now I've said, there's a press release with you doing it with one of our neighbors.
It has to be with a system like a service. It can't be with somebody like Piedmont who has a presence here in the county.
But they have to be a willing partner, and so
Have they been contacted?
we've talked to them about it, and he was in the process of maybe joining with another firm, and that didn't work out. But in order for the state to invest, he's going to have to open up his designs, and they probably wouldn't be willing to invest in systems that are not on actual towers.
Well, the other issue too, and this is a maybe, is he doesn't have an FCC license, does he?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
And there's something in there about, licensing the bandwidth or something, but I don't know if that's it. That was an issue with the, so we'll see.
So Piedmont has been at your broadband committee meetings, you invited?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Many of them.
Yeah.
We've had one-on-ones with him as well, when we were having one-on-ones with many other companies saying, hey, we want to grow this thing, help us, let's be partners. That was really when he came to the table, when he heard we were talking to other people.
Good idea to reach back out to him.
I haven't talked to Mr. Sheehan directly about that, but I've been asking that question by several people why.
Yeah, anything to grow the system would be great.
That's all I have there.
Recreation.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We actually originally had our meeting scheduled for, I believe it was the 11th, when we had that really terrible flooding thunderstorm system come through. And so it was rescheduled for the following week, and I was actually not able to attend that meeting. But there was a $1,000 grant awarded to the authority for plantings at the park. They continue to work on the sign and possible water fountain questions. And then there's additional planning for the park that they're working through, similar to what we're doing with Riley Wilson, undertaking some studies so that they're able to be eligible for some grants going forward. So, and then they also had the dark sky event this past Saturday, which I was not able to attend. I'm not sure if anybody else attended.
I spoke to someone who went and they said it was phenomenal.
Oh, good.
It looks like it was very well attended, and it sure was a beautiful evening. So, thank you, that's all I have.
Is there any discussion about the repaving of the parking lot at the park? I know there's going to be some paving coming up.
Yeah, I was going to mention that there was, of course, the board provided funding to the rec authority to help with their ADA, which is an accessible path to the pavilion as well as ADA parking space. So that is what the rec authority bid, and unfortunately received no bids. And so they issued the bid again, and they're hopeful to receive some bids this time. And in the intervening period, they reached out to the various local contractors who said they were going to be interested in this. Why didn't you bid? I think they get various stories of, well, you got it, and things like that. So hopefully the second time around we'll bring a bid. And the other is the signs along the highway. I've had some back and forth with Mr. Nesbitt, and basically told me, no, you have to go through the program, contact the program people, They gave us a quote of $3,500 to $4,000. I sent that back to Nesbitt and said, this is ridiculous. So we're still working.
Okay, thank you. Were you able to attend the last RCRFA meeting?
That was not.
Okay, I know that you having to split your time
That was a
between
different date, but
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
But I don't know, Gary, I mean, I don't know if it's Superior or who's coming in to do paving work in the county in the next couple of weeks. They might.
Whoever has the contract with VDOT will do the town streets that are already scheduled in by contract. Now, paving the entire parking lot, I don't know what that would cost. The authority could do that.
I mean, I don't know what you're bidding on, just the handicap spaces or whatever.
Yeah, so it wouldn't really work to use a paver for one spot, and they have to do the sidewalk, so that's a concrete job as opposed to an asphalt job.
Okay.
If they pave the whole parking lot, that could be an asphalt job. But they don't have the money to do that.
Okay, Ms. Burns, planning commission update?
Yes, Ms. Summers provided a synopsis in her zoning administrator update, and I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has any concerns from that meeting. That's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Frazier, rules committee?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, as you know, three of us met, as myself, the chairman, and Mr. Curry, and we had discussed the items that the board had tasked us with. And that was, I had it here, maybe. Basically, the standard policy for meeting agenda layout, consent agenda, standard policy for appointments, and then what we're working on as part of the Finance Committee, the Rules Committee looked at some of the language on that resolution that we have to reword and the actual intent of the Finance Committee. So we had a good meeting, substitute conversations, and Mr. Curry was supposed to, when we had time, was take a look at what may be available in other jurisdictions that we may be able to use as a template. So we'll be working on these three things at the end of this month. Hopefully we'll have something soon. And there was something that I added to the agenda after receiving the VML FOIA training materials, the electronic meetings. We don't have any process by where one member of this board could still participate in a meeting if they had like a family emergency or something of that nature. So I thought if we could just discuss that, and we're going to look at that also, that's at least the board's approval. It's pretty much limited. You know, you can't do it just because we're on vacation and we want to hang out another day on the beach or wherever we happen to be, but it would be something that there's a process by which if the governor declares an emergency and we're forced to have a meeting because of that emergency, there's already something there that we can deal with it. But we don't have a policy of our own, and I thought that it might be beneficial that we actually look at that.
In order to make use of electronic meetings for health or personal reasons, we must have a policy.
Right.
For emergency reasons, you can just do it. You go.
Do we have the technology to support that?
Well, that would be part of the discussion, and you could enact a policy that would enable those electronic meetings to happen with the necessary technology, and then you can only do it if you provided that. So, telephone system.
Or spell out what the technology is. I mean, obviously, if you're at a remote location, that part of the meeting would not have to be open to the public, but it would have to have a quorum to even start a meeting. And then if somebody, called in or used Skype, and I'm talking about stuff I don't even know how to use, but well, you would have that ability for one of the members. And it would be limited like no more than twice a year, and it would have to be spelled out exactly what their policy is. Like I said, it would be a personal emergency of some sort. Not simply because I want to hang out at the beach. So we basically have your blessings to continue looking at that.
And I've committed to the Rules Committee to work on some drafts of the 3 items that Mr. Frazier mentioned based on the comments that came up during that meeting.
We're pretty much past that to start with this last one was a new one. I just thought it might be something that would be beneficial if we had it in place.
I'm sure there are several policies out there for our peers that we can just use.
Now recreate the wheel. Find the simplest one and use it. That's all I have.
Reestablish Finance Committee?
Again, I think we handled that a little bit under the Rules Committee because we're working on that resolution.
Okay, old business.
That takes us to the
Public
just a review of legal matters, just a recitation of where we are. I believe everything is the same except for the Sonnet case. The petition for appeal was filed on July 25th, as the board is aware. I believe the other two are the same. I did note that the next date for the General District Court Capielli matter is September 10th, and I believe the Circuit Court matter brought by Atkins Connick is October sometime. And Mr. Crawford, I can answer any questions you may have.
No question? Okay, Public Safety Committee, 16.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did forget on the Planning Commission update and on the RCRFA update, next Recreational Facilities Authority meeting is this Thursday evening at the library. And then the next Planning Commission meeting is the work session, which is scheduled for the 14th here at the courthouse. But the Public Safety Committee meets again at the end of this month. And in reviewing the Public Safety Committee rules, some of them were cumbersome, I would say more cumbersome even than the rules that this body operates under, and included some things that simply aren't done like electronic recording. It isn't done at that meeting, and verbatim minutes don't happen at that meeting. So this was just a little bit of rewarding to illustrate just a few changes that would make the rules for that committee more as what you would expect of just an advisory committee, where we should be able to have a less formal discussion. Not everything should have to be motioned and seconded simply to have a discussion. So these changes were a reflection of how that committee actually seems to function more efficiently, and I was just asking for consensus or endorsement of the board for these few changes to the rules.
And as Ms. Smith noted, these are included as an attachment to ordinance.
So I'm sorry, let's see, under the minutes here, you've taken out no verbatim record of the proceedings need be transcribed unless it's requested by a majority. So there doesn't, it's kind of like one of our committee boards where you're required to take minutes then, is that the spirit?
They do keep minutes.
Yeah.
It's just speaking of verbatim, I do not believe they would be required to take minutes from a FOIA perspective, like some of the other committees. It doesn't mean it's not a good idea.
Mr. Convenquist going to do?
Oh, he will still take minutes.
And they'll be green.
Yeah, I think we could save money if we use a different colors.
You have that conversation with him.
Right between green and Gary will just print them in black. So, but this is just a few minor changes to align the rules with actual practice. Is this something that we need to approve as a board?
I think these are actually the rules of the committee, and one of the problems with this committee is that I have been unable to find, which doesn't mean it doesn't exist, what the board, in creating this committee, asked the committee to accomplish. So perhaps parallel to this document, which would be how the committee carries out their business, would be some reflection by the board. What do you want them to do?
And
Who should be doing it?
And we sort of kick that around a little bit. And I don't know, you serve on this also, Mr. Frazier, you may have a feeling about this. I think if we give only a certain scope, then something may arise that we don't anticipate that we may very well want to address as a public safety issue. So I too thought that maybe we should have a narrower scope in our defining documents, but in retrospect, it does allow us to take up matters as they do arise, and you can't really anticipate everything that might happen.
I think the LEPC has to meet at least once a year in order to, I mean, there's some charter or something that requires
the federal code for Sarah Title 3.
Yeah, so you
Title something.
you have to have that once a year.
Right, and they do generally meet before our regular public safety
Yeah, once a
meeting. So that is part of the business that we do, and then we do conduct our quarterly meetings as well.
I don't think that we should be very limited in the scope of the committee, but I think as long as it addresses a public safety concern, and either brought to us by the public or fire and rescue or members of that committee like the law enforcement, I think it would be pretty well, obviously, we wouldn't want to be talking about building safety unless it was public safety related, like the generator or something of that nature. Probably not whether we should have 13 risers in the staircase or 14.
Right. I think the emergency management coordinator needs to run periodic drills or something, or needs to,
That would be something that they could.
yeah, they could call already, you know, want to be aware of that.
I think it's still evolving. It's not that old. Maybe it's not like we've had it in place for 30 years.
So do you want to make a
Well, if the board doesn't want to take action on it at this time, we can certainly discuss them at the next public safety committee meeting,
Right.
which is at the end of this month.
Yeah, I think it would be appropriate for I suspect that the Public Safety Committee meeting and the Public Safety Committee themselves adopted these rules in which the changes were made.
Yeah.
It would be the appropriate body to adopt the new rules.
That's what I would like to.
However, if the board didn't think these rules were appropriate, I'm sure that your committee would listen.
But if you have any objections at this time, or if you have any objections before the next public safety committee meeting, we do meet at the end of this month, so just let me know. If you would, please.
Next on your agenda is an update of policy 310, which I mentioned earlier in the meeting. And that relates to the timely payment of invoices. This was a request that came to me initially from the treasurer's office, and after talking with them about it, I concurred and supported the requested change to the policy. And that is to require an original invoice be submitted to their office when paying invoices. And however, understanding that original invoices may not always be available, provided a relief valve of sorts, or an explanation is provided. This came up with one of the other offices. When the treasurer's office said they want an original invoice, the other office said, well, that's not what we do. And so the answer to that is, it is if it's the policy. So we're asking that the board adopt this slightly modified policy to require those original invoices to make sure what we're paying is what we're supposed to pay, and that they can be held and saved as necessary, and the departments can hold out to copies if they'd like. You passed this by resolution last time, so I've prepared a resolution to update if the board is interested in doing that. It's attached to the agenda item and basically recognizes the original reasons for doing this, which is prompt payment pursuant to the Code of Virginia procurement, and recommendation from your auditors to pay your bills on time, and then recognizes that you've had a policy in the past, and this is just revising and updating that policy. I can answer any other questions.
I'll make a motion we pass this resolution updating the policy to ensure timely payment of invoices.
That is second.
Motion made and second.
Roll call.
Roll call vote. Mr. Frazier. Mr. Lozinski.
Aye.
Ms. Smith.
Aye.
Parrish.
Aye.
Aye also. Recycling, I believe.
Ms. Smith asked for an update. I provided some information. I don't know if Ms. Smith, you wanted to speak generally to it, or you just want me to?
Why don't you go ahead, Gary? I have something to add, and I do appreciate that.
As board members are probably familiar, many of our neighboring localities have been struggling with recycling and how to manage their current process. Many are discontinuing certain portions of the recycling program. Others are changing what they do. I think coming out of discussions from the last meeting where we, county administration staff, spent some time with our vendor to clean up our invoices, that caused, I think, Ms. Smith to ask some questions about, well, what are we doing? Where do our recyclables go? And are they actually being recycled? I can answer most of those questions, but not the, are they actually being recycled? We don't know. Updike has a number of companies under them, one of which is Efficient Roll-Off and Recycling. I've provided links in the board docs. They haul our recyclables to their own other firm, which is it's AMRF. I think it's a material recycling facility, and they name their company AMRF, where they bring in commingled recyclables, and then they have processes in place to separate them and decide what has value, what doesn't have value, and then they have resale pathways for what has value. So what actually goes into the MRF, as they're called, and as commingled, and what comes out, we don't have a window into that black box. But for the privilege of recycling, where at one time there was a revenue generator, this is a costly proposition for Rappahannock County, and it's about $100,000 a year to have the right to recycle. And we presume that much of our recyclables actually get recycled, but it would be cheaper if we just threw it all away. That's not necessarily best for the environment. We do have a goal from the state that we need to meet for low population localities of 15%. We had to hit that. Because we are very small, we only have to report once every 4 years. So the last time we had to report, we met it. We reported last year and met it, but they've been asking us questions about the details and the numbers. because we take credit for a source reduction program, and they want more details on that. So we could spend a lot of time talking about recycling and ways to improve the process. And I don't think there's a magic bullet. Some of our new localities have made some significant strides, including Page, and how they're handling it. They're collecting it all themselves, separating themselves and baling, and actually making some revenue. But they have balers and equipment of their own. You don't have that or a landfill facility to do that. As I noted in the past, we need to improve what we do and contract for what we do through hopefully a competitive process. Haven't done that yet, and it's something we need to do.
And we don't have a contract in place with Uptake at this time, correct?
We, last year, we searched for a contract with Updike, asked them to produce a contract, and we could not identify a contract.
So what happens if we don't meet 15%?
Most things with the state, they make you write a report on how you're going to do better.
Can this be woven into whatever future discussions you have in bidding this out when it gets to the top of the inbox?
Yeah, it's critically needed. Yes, but it doesn't guarantee that we would have a certain recycling rate, or the economies of recycling are very, very poor right now, because there's no, there just aren't buyers.
Right.
So it's a commodity without any great interest, so supply and demand, it's tough. So a lot of localities are dropping glass, which is the easiest to recycle. I mentioned this before, but it's so heavy, it costs too much to truck it around. So unless you have something you can do with it really close, then a lot of localities are just get rid of it. But our calculations are by mass, so that would really hurt us. We just need to grind the trees in the right year and take credit for that. Because that's recycling as well.
And I haven't heard anything that Culpeper's made any changes.
I did not know.
I don't recall hearing anything like that. And we have an agreement with them where we can take recycling and trash to their facility.
All
We have
of
a mutual agreement, right?
our trash goes to the Culpeper transfer station. So it's picked up out of our pits, put into a truck, driven to Culpeper, dumped on the ground, pushed into a truck, hauled to Richmond, where all we should go. Our recyclables go to AMRF, which I think also in Culpeper, but totally separate. We historically developed an agreement with the government of Culpeper that their residents can use our facilities and our residents can use their facilities without charge. So that is what you're speaking of. If we were to change how we contract, that then may impact that. So we pay a lot to dump our trash in Culpeper. I think it's $54 a ton. Whereas Page takes it for in the 30s, but there's a mountain between us.
And I know you had looked into the agreements that they had recently forged, and we're hoping to win maybe some things that might benefit us.
And Madison just put an RFP out and didn't have a very good response, but contracted with Updike at the end of the day. They did include in their documents, their RFP, competitive procurement clauses, and the state allows, it would allow other localities to buy off their contract. So that may be an avenue for us. And one of the conversations with Updike has been that they can't invest in their capital without a contract with us, because they could be here today, gone tomorrow. So it may be an avenue to negotiate with Updike through the contract with Madison. We thought they would be the only ones that would respond to an RFP anyway, but we may want to test the waters with an RFP first, which would then tip our hand that Updike is the only one, and they would be less inclined to negotiate. So
We don't have to necessarily work with the same person for trash removal and recycling?
No.
Talking to the guy in Culpeper who owns the recycling place in downtown, and he was kind of crying the blues because China couldn't buy recyclables.
China sold it.
But he's still, I think, paying for since 100.
For steel, that is the only commodity right now that may make some sense. And for that, we don't pay anything to get rid of our steel. So we don't pay for them to haul it away, and we don't get any revenue. We don't have any charge. That's the only thing that breaks the
In terms
difference.
of like aluminum, don't they, the cans, don't they get some for that?
I think when it's all comes
What I'm
down.
getting at is, if we kept on the Updike or somebody else to haul our trash away and contacted a small company that may be possibly.
Yeah, and it may be separated recycles instead of commingled in one. You would have then multiple containers with cans in one, glass in one, plastic in another. We would have to make sure that they're staying separated and not contaminated. But Uptake is a relatively small company who's doing this for us right now.
We were separating at one time, definitely.
Yeah, and probably when Updike brought their MRF online, the problem with separated recyclables is it's invariably not separated. Right, so you have contamination and you have someone separating it anyway. So a lot of localities move to commingled, where send it to a MRF and then you use air and magnetism and all density to separate these things out in a mechanical standpoint. Now where China doesn't want all this stuff, it's swinging back around to source separate. So the moral of the story is we pay something, and we pay through waste.
And it's getting more expensive, as I understand it.
Has been our tipping fees have been inching up, but after 2008-9, companies started throwing out fuel charges and things like that. Without contracts, we can't dispute those. And we could say we're not going to pay you, but then we have to find somebody to take the trash. And our setup is not typical.
I don't know that there's clear action to take on this at this point, but what do you think is the best way forward with this?
We have one of two paths: either put an RFP on the street that is very broad and allows any companies who may be interested here to handle our waste and recyclables in manners they prescribe, that would be most cost effective for them, therefore most cost effective for us, or sit down and try to negotiate something with Updike through access via the contract with us. And I'm not sure the best order of operations. Where you would have the most leverage with Updike, I don't know.
What about Page? You said Page has their own recycling capability. I mean, does it make sense?
They, when I talked to them last summer, they're very interested in us bringing our waste to them. Of course, I would think they would be a player in the RFP. The problem is we really don't want them hauling it over to 11, I don't think. And it's tough to get waste from here over the back to there, so they're probably going over Chester Gap, which isn't quite as bad. We don't want trash trucks tipping over on 211 in the park with county waste, and then it's just probably not a scenario that would be good for us. So we would want them not to do that, which makes it a little more costly rather than hauling to Culpeper. It may still work out being that's the best solution. We'd have to find somebody to do that. It's very long. Because of our haul distance is long, it suggests that we would want as much in every load as possible, which means we probably want compactors at the convenience points and the refuse centers. So that's where I would suggest you open that up to those companies to tell you how the most effective and efficient way to do it is, and hopefully get a bite. But we're far away from the Winchester market, far away from the Northern Virginia market, even farther away from other markets. So we don't have a lot of waste. We're not really a great cost for any of the companies. There's bound to be ways to do it that are more cost effective than what we're doing, which I would have to suggest is the least cost effective. Can't imagine a way that is less cost effective. So it's been on my short list for a year, so my short list is obviously long.
And I know that, Gary, I really do appreciate that. And I guess I don't want it to fall off the radar, so could this just be a recurring agenda item so that we all hear the information about what's going on, how we're being affected and what's going on in neighboring localities, so that, when the time does come, we are in a position where we can make a decision and make a move and hopefully save some money. Thank you very much.
Once upon a time, I designed landfills and things. It was a long time ago. All right, we've already finished page 3. This is where we already talked about all the things on my update. See, telephone landlines. This has been, July was one of the most active months for complaints that we've had for a very long time. And the first time I can remember recently that there are open, active, unresolved issues. CenturyLink had 7 complaints and Verizon 4. It appears a number of the issues are related to the same area and the same CenturyLink area that we believe will be resolved with the fiber backhaul project. And I don't know if that's causing them to invest less in fixing the copper right now, but we've been a squeaky wheel on those. One of the Verizon concerns was regarding timely installation of service, which really opened up a big can of worms because it was for a secondary structure around a home, property which was being used for, appears to be being used for things that are not zoned for, so it basically self-reported a potential zoning violation, and we will be getting letters and about that. So that's happening. Relative to the radio system, I asked to get a copy of the expected change order before today. That didn't happen. I was told it was going through their system for approval. That is for the 2 sites to make sure we have generator backup. So I'll let you know as soon as I have that. We may want to move on that quickly when it comes in, so I may ask you to have a special meeting when that comes in, depending on what we learn. Still haven't nailed down the lease with SBA at Amosville. I've asked them what's holding it up, and I've been told that it's a big bureaucratic process inside SBA. It's a nationwide company. Everything's through an online database portal, and I was told that one group is going to ping the other group, and I should see something. Said the former county editing electrical work is complete. We talked a lot about the electrical review. The one thing I didn't mention is the same time the engineer was out to look at, the second time we looked at the electrical here. We did make this field visits to the school and the bus shop to look at the transfer connect, automatic transfer, manual transfer switches for those 2 locations. And he looked at the Army surplus generator, and we learned that it won't do 1-phase 240 volt, which is what we need here and at the bus garage, and it won't do what we need at high school, so it basically won't do anything. It's 3-phase 208, and can't do 240 volts. So he said we could potentially get a buck boost transformer, but that would be costly and it doesn't make a lot of sense. So I'm not sure how fire stations, if they have the same name, are using them. We try to, it's a very nice generator, computer driven. You can't increase the voltage that high. It has a regulator built in. Imagine you could tear it down and redo it. That's what timeline from that.
It's the delta leg it can't handle.
Now you're speaking Greek. Because at the school is 3-phase 4-wire with a delta, so, but it's only 60 kW and it's too small.
We use a very limited.
Which then, we have some preliminary information from him on the costs for breaking out limited panels at the school versus having a manual transfer switch that could bring a trailer mounted generator and do the whole thing. And then Kevin Co looked for grant money. The difference was he thought it'd be $200,000 to do a fixed generator and $150,000 to do a small fixed generator. Well, if it's grant money, then maybe we don't.
Even with the smaller generator, it's not large enough.
Now, with a manual transfer switch, it would be obviously much less than that, and we would then have to make sure we have a trailer mounted generator when we open up shop, which many localities do. But once you put in a generator for part of the load at the school, you have to catch up to the code requirement to put generator power to the emergency loads at the school, which then starts to get complicated on which loads from what panel go to that generator, which then pushes you towards the generator of the whole building. We don't have the Wiley Wilson report yet. Personnel manual, Lauren and I are quite close to having a draft ready for the board. I do recommend that we find an HR specialist of some sort to run that through. I need to know whether you want that to happen before or after board season. Because I think we could hire somebody to do that within my purchasing threshold.
It would be my preference for us to see it first.
Let's do that. Next month we'll have carryover appropriations for capital projects on the agenda. These are the various things like the radio system that was delayed into last year that we never actually paid, and so will be paid out of this year. It wasn't in the approved budget, so we need to make sure those capital dollars are in FY20, and the remainder of the capital dollars and projects that weren't finished, like the 911 upgrades that are happening that were mostly completed, but I didn't budget for them in 20, waiting to see how much was going to be spent in June 30th. The balance can then be put into FY20. Those will be on the agenda. And lastly, about a year ago, we talked about floodplain changes. We are now in the paper advertised that we're in the 90-day technical appeal period, which for our preliminary maps. And so if there are any technical reasons why the new floodplain district is inaccurate, we can appeal it. That would take an engineering study, so it's very rare that that happens. Once that 90-day period ends, we'll get a final determination letter, which means within 6 months we'll have to adopt an updated floodplain ordinance, which is inside our zoning ordinance, that meets updated wording requirements and references the new map as opposed to the old map. And that will change for a number of people, as we've talked about a year ago. That's all.
That was enough.
Yeah.
That part I'd like you to repeat again.
The buck goes strong. I put that in the list. Included in the packet are the typical reports, the building permit report, the zoning report that Ms. Smith referenced earlier, as well as the DDOT report. And then after that is the clerk's meeting.
E1, closed meeting for board employees, performance evaluation. I don't see anybody's name out to the right.
Well, it was discussed in the last meeting. And during the adoption of the minutes for those.
Well, I can start the conversation by saying that I do think anytime we have a personnel matter and we're going to review somebody, that it should be in closed session. Because it is, for the very reason that it is a personnel matter, and that's one of the reasons that you can and should go into closed. I know I wasn't here last month when the board discussed it. I came I have my written reviews here using the standard forms for both the county administrator and the county attorney. The only thing that I will mention here, maybe where we can start the discussion, is there's a sentence, second from the bottom of page 1 on these performance evaluation sheets that reads, after completing the evaluation form, it should be returned to the board chair, who will tabulate the evaluations for the Board of Supervisors review and discussion with, in this case, either the county administrator or the county attorney. So I think that's a step that's where we are in the process right now, and that's the next step. Just to give our input to the board chair so we can take that, and then perhaps it's appropriate to have a closed session in September to, for the purposes of performance review.
But the problem is that we did that last time and we didn't have any feedback. And when we questioned, the board chair said that they would put them in the file. So we didn't get any feedback as to the questions or the issues that were written in the process. And in that particular case, they continued. They weren't resolved because we didn't resolve them.
I think just because this doesn't explicitly say the board should sit down and discuss their individual concerns in closed session doesn't mean that that's something that we should do. I think we should still go into closed session, discuss the reviews, and then to the chair and have him go through the results with the personnel that we're evaluating. That's what we did last year. It's the reasonable approach.
Any other comments? Do we have a vote?
I'll put that in the form of a motion, a resolution that we have to do in closed session. Motion to conduct a closed meeting. I move that the Rappahannock County Board of Supervisors conduct a closed meeting in accordance with 2.2-3711A of the Code of Virginia for the purpose of 1, discussion and consideration of the performance of specific employees of any public body, 2.2-3711A1. The subject matter of the closed meeting will be 1, performance evaluation for the county administrator for section 15 of the employment agreement, and 2, performance evaluation for the county attorney. So moved.
I second that motion.
So discussion, it sets a precedent that we're not giving the chair the ability, and not just chair this year, but the chair at the beginning of the year when the next 6-month review comes around, and the chair for a year from now, and all future chairs, to have a leadership role in this evaluation process. I mean, we said it on our forms here, we adopted these forms. So that's my only concern in moving forward and throwing these all out on the table here in the closed session today, just to sort through them. Let's think that there's a leadership role for the chair here to play before, and should be played by whoever's the future chair coming January. So I still feel that that's an important step that needs to be taken. It only results, for my purposes, in a 30-day, or whatever the next delay, or whatever the next time it is that we meet.
Any other comment?
I don't know why this always has to be so difficult. The reason we don't get anywhere with this is because we never complete the process.
I have my forms ready and prepared to hand to the chair today. So I think the process, I'm trying to respect the process here that we've identified in page 1 of these evaluations.
I suppose they're more like guidelines instead of written in concrete.
I'll have a motion and a second.
It'd be best as a
Roll call vote. Mr. Fraser.
Aye.
Mr. Lozinski.
Nay.
Ms. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Parrish.
Nay.
And Mr. Welch. Nay.
But you guys should really have sore toes by now, as many times as we've kicked the same can. Have you got bunions, Mr. Chair?
Beg your pardon?
Do you have bunions?
I don't think so, Mr. Chairman.
I mean, this review is spelled out that we should do it on an annual basis in the county administrator's contract. He's been graceful enough, to let us go past what was to be the deadline. I don't understand why we continue not to be able to take action on this matter.
All right, recess until,
They don't want to hear complaints.
Do we give these to the chair?
yeah, I'll
Here.
do it.
I've got the note for you.
And let's see, closed meeting for board employees.
Did that.
Did that, recess till 7, reconvene at 7. Certification of closed meeting.
Don't need that.
Heightened deer vehicle collision route to 11. Is that these gentlemen here for?
Yes, Mr. Fraser brought this up. We discussed it briefly at the last meeting, and during the last meeting, we asked if representatives from the Department of Game and Inland Fisheries could possibly be here to discuss the topic. They are here, and we can now discuss the topic. Maybe Mr. Fraser, you want to provide any further introduction?
What I may do is pass the ball to you, but no, some time back, I think we had members of the DGIF up here, and I think that's when we got added to maybe the Add-a-Buck program.
Add-a-Buck, yes, sir.
Add-a-Buck. Well, there just seems to be an awful lot of vehicle deer collisions, which I'm painfully aware of. And I'm personal way, but it just seems like there's just so many deer running everywhere. I mean, they're literally everywhere right now. And there's not that many private land available to them, hunters to hunt on. So the deer seem to have these pockets, these reservoirs where they can stay protected until the season is over. And as long as it is, it seems like they're not being harvested near enough to make a dent in it. Fauquier used to have a longer season. For some reason, that's been cut back to where it is now. Loudoun and eastern counties have a longer season. And I was just wondering what maybe we could do here to try and alleviate some of the problems with it.
So, in looking at the information that we have with respect to this topic.
Excuse me, point of order. Could I ask if they identify themselves when they speak?
I'm Sergeant Owen Bullard.
Okay, thank you.
With the Virginia Department of Game and Fisheries.
Thank you.
I'm Officer Tim Bostic. I'm also with Virginia Department of Game and Fisheries.
Thank you.
We're conservation police officers.
Okay.
And Officer Bostic is a Rappahannock County resident, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Sorry.
So I mean, with respect to this topic, there's a couple of things. I guess the first thing I need to impress upon everybody is that anytime you're talking about anything with wildlife populations, the equation is large. So the variables are many. And so it's hard to, put your finger on, this is what's causing something or that's what's causing something. And usually it's a combination of things. And so I don't think Rappahannock's any exception. In looking at the information with respect to Rappahannock County, during the 2018-2019 season, 52% of the deer kill was female. Okay, that means approximately 48% male. If one of the things that we want to encourage hunters to do, and that's why we initiated Earn a Buck, is to take a few more females out of the population. That's how you lower the deer density. Okay, so it's almost sort of a hunter cultural thing where we've got to encourage them to take more females and let some of the males go. But you have people out there who, they're interested in that trophy deer. So when you're interested in that trophy deer and that's what you're hunting for, a lot of times you don't shoot a female deer. If you want to lower the population a little bit, then we would like to see more of a maybe 60% females, 40% deers, or 70% females, 30% males. You see what I'm saying? So you want to encourage hunters to take more female deer. That'll help lower the population. One of the other things in Rappahannock, and you touched on it, is the fact that we have an index that we use that sort of looks at the deer population density with respect to private versus public land. You all have no huntable public land in Rappahannock. So your index is almost in the very high range in terms of private land versus deer density. Do you understand what I'm saying when I say that? The only reason you're not in the very high range is because you have Shenandoah National Park. So you've got this big piece of what is public land. It's not huntable for deer, but you have this big piece of public land. If you took Shenandoah out and just included the rest of Rappahannock County, that would probably move you into the very high range in terms of deer density for private property. So how does that relate to what we're talking about? Well, if you have large landowners who maybe have 500,000 acres and they only let one person hunt, how many deer are they logically going to be able to take out of that population? You see what I'm saying? And so, and I'm sure Officer Bostic is aware, as I am, that there are some fairly large properties in Rappahannock that either don't allow hunting or that have maybe just a few people that hunt, just a very small few.
That's correct. Even the largest farm, such as Eldon, has very few select people that can hunt it based on the size of the property.
Right.
So that's that's just a piece of the equation. So we're trying to encourage with the earn a buck, and it's something that maybe you have to encourage the private landowners to do with their hunters, is to maybe take a few more female deer out of the population. That'll help kind of lower that density. But having said that, with the statistics that we have, and we only have through 2017, you guys are fairly flat in terms of vehicle deer strikes. Okay, we only have through 2017. We don't have 2018 and 2019 data yet. So I don't know if you guys have that, but that might be somewhere where you could get through the Insurance Institute or maybe the state police or somebody like that. I don't know who might keep that information. But the information we have through 2017, and actually if you look at even further back than that, the vehicle deer strikes have actually gone down a little bit in Rappahannock County over time. And I understand perception. Perception is reality. So if there's this perception that more people are hitting them, then that's sort of the reality, and you have constituents that are coming to you. In terms of what the game department is trying to do in deer density, we're trying to do a reduction of the herd in Rappahannock, but not a drastic one. So I'll give you an example. So let's say in Loudoun County, for instance, you mentioned the extended season, where they're trying to do a drastic reduction in the deer density. And in some counties, we're trying to do a drastic increase because they don't have quite as many deer, okay? Well, Rappahannock would fall somewhere kind of in the middle of that. All right, does that make sense? So we're trying to do a little bit of a herd reduction, but not a drastic one. And that's just based on the indexes that the biologists use in terms of the deer kill data that we get, hunter success, things like that, population data that we get. So I guess that's sort of the best way that I can kind of at least initiate some of the, or talk to you intelligently about some of the things that might be going on. There can be other reasons that are causing things, and that's why I said the equation is big and the variables are many. It can be as simple as, where you put a road, or did the road go from a one-lane tar and chip to now it's 2 lanes with a stripe down the middle of it? Did somebody build a house or a subdivision that has now moved the deer from, they didn't used to cross the highway and now they do? And you see what I'm saying? So, I mean, it can be things like that. Do we know that? No, we don't. We don't look at such things. And there's a lot of things that can be done if you're experiencing a particular area where you're having those things done. VDOT can put up things like, deer crossing signs, encourage people to slow down a little bit. And one of the things most of the time when people are hitting deer is generally right there, just after dark or just before morning time when they're the most active. And that's more of a, how do you get people to change behavior on 211 who are driving 60, 65 miles an hour, and the speed limit is 55. So the variables can be many. We don't always know exactly what they are. But in terms of the hard data that we have, you guys are fairly flat with the vehicle card, deer strikes, and injuries related to those. Yes, sir.
As far as trying to encourage hunters to take does instead of bucks, has DGIF ever looked at, let's call it an incentive program, where the processing fee for a doe might be less than a process? I realize that's done in the private sector. I mean, when I started, I mean, it was $65, $75, now it's $85, no matter the size and no matter the sex. I don't know if there's money within DGIF, or if there's some federal money or something like that, where you can actually say, well, it's only $55 to process a doe, $75, or just give it $20.
Subsidize. If you'll shoot more, we'll subsidize. You get your deer taken care of.
Until such time that bag of money runs out.
The county knows that, right?
We fund the processing of deer that is turned over to the food pantry.
Right,
Yeah.
right, but that's, yeah, but
But
that's.
you could fund a different project.
Okay, so.
Probably, we'd have to make sure you have legislative authority.
Yeah, it's kind of like a Hunters for the Hungry kind of,
Yeah.
program. That's private, I guess, is it not? Or I guess the state must be money on Hunters for the Hungry, don't they? Or-
I think, we're not.
You
guys work with Muskrat Haven.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, they're not. in
And
it.
they process the deer and give it
provide
to
for
us.
it local.
$50 for that from the county.
And so, I mean, they've got some avenues like that. We don't subsidize people processing deer. One of the things, again, like I said, the variables are so many that you can't always put your finger on why a hunter is choosing to shoot or not shoot. It can be just in terms of, I want to shoot a large antlered deer and some of the, I'm going to let the does go. I've heard, local people tell me, well, my grandfather told me if you shoot a doe deer, you're cutting your own throat. So I just don't do it. It's cultural. That's it.
Right.
They'll shoot a 4-point buck in a heartbeat, or a 6-point buck, but they won't shoot a doe.
Yeah, I mean, there are people that are opposed to earn a buck, and they're pretty vocal about it.
And it's just cultural. So, that's one of the things where sort of the regulation comes in, where we created the earn a buck. Where now, if you're gonna hunt in Rappahannock County, okay, you can go ahead and shoot that 4-pointer, but you're not allowed another deer in Rappahannock County until you shoot that female deer. So the regulation is kind of forcing them that way.
No, you're right, it's a cultural thing. I mean, my father, he never could tell me when he thought he saw the first deer. My father-in-law says he thought he was 18 when he saw it.
Right.
You tell people that now, they think you're bold or living.
I mean, years ago, if someone saw a deer, they would call and tell everybody, and people would drive for miles around to go see it.
Yeah.
And now, you're seeing them way too close for your comfort.
So,
I was born and raised on a farm, and during deer season, we would actually go take hay, put it on the edge of the Shenandoah Park, for the deer to have something to eat, because they had no food.
Back then.
Yeah.
So, who makes the regulations for nuisance killing or crop damage killing? I mean, farmers can get a permit to shoot
Okay,
on
so
one side of the year.
the Department of Game and Fisheries regulates.
They make that, so it's that their board that makes those regulations.
Okay, so the kill permit, the provisions for a kill permit, a damage permit, is actually in code, and code is made by the legislature.
That's what I was thinking.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the legislature says when they're the ones who wrote that language.
Right.
Obviously, we have some input as a department,
Right.
our board has some input
Yeah.
into it, but that's code.
Yeah.
So, whereas the board can create regulations for hunting, where we can just kind of wave our magic wand and say it's gonna be earn a buck.
Right.
And doe season,
Right.
this time of year, or we might be able to extend
Right.
and make an extra season in Loudoun County. But the damage part of it is code, and that's done by the
Okay,
legislature.
I actually talked to Mr. Bostic about this, and he's educated me to a degree. And so, for example, hay per se, regular old fescue and orchard grass is not really a crop. It doesn't qualify with alfalfa May, is from what I understand. But meanwhile, you have many households that put a big investment into a flower garden. And they're not able to protect that flower garden, through shooting the deer. And I'm just wondering, is there any way that that can be tweaked? We'd have to go through the state legislature to do that? Because look, to get a hunter's license to go out and shoot whatever the quota is, and you can, as long as you got permission, you can go on anybody's land. But the damage stuff, you've got to be on your own land, as far as I understand it, right? So why can't, why can't they tweak it to where the average housewife couldn't go out and shoot a deer in the garden? If that would be, is there any chance that the legislature would listen to that kind of logic? Because they do a tremendous amount of damage and there were, a lot of, investment put into some of these gardens. Go ahead.
There's actually verbiage in the code that's already there that covers smaller parcels less than 5 acres that are non-commercial entities, so for ornamental damage.
There is?
There is. So basically, they have to observe the ornamental damage, contact our department, and request a call for service where the officer comes out, looks at the property,
Okay.
recognizes the damage, can prove that it is deer that is causing the damage.
Right.
Then based on their location, you wouldn't necessarily want a person with a rifle to fire it off in the middle of Washington here.
Right.
So we can limit the type of activity they can use to take that animal that's causing the damage.
Right.
And we can limit the number, but that is actually already in the code.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, I knew a landowner up on Red Oak Mountain that got a kill permit because they were wiping out his azaleas.
Yeah, well, I mean, that should be out. It should be. So it looks like there's only, even though we're on the norm, we think we have too many deer.
Right, I understand.
Yeah, so we're looking for ways to, diminish the population.
Well, and understand that when people say they have too many deer, we have different types of carrying capacities, technical terms. You guys right now are feeling like, and maybe you're getting residents who are telling you this, where deer have exceeded their cultural carrying capacity, which means that's how many we really want around, versus what's their actual biological carrying capacity. You see what I mean? To the farmer who lives on margin, an acre of deer damage is 1 acre too much. So one deer eating, half an acre of his crop is 1 deer too many. That's a cultural carrying capacity issue versus a biological carrying capacity issue. So those are the types of things that we try to balance as an agency.
Right.
Of, what are we seeing? And that's one of the reasons why we try to provide landowners and farmers with relief,
That's wonderful.
so that we can balance that cultural carrying capacity and that biological carrying capacity.
And then, what are the chances of getting an extended deer season?
An extended season?
Yeah, an extended.
Well, I don't know, is the short answer.
That goes through the.
I know, yeah, that goes through our board, and
And the process is.
I can't tell you,
Request it.
I can't tell you it's a good chance or a bad chance.
Right.
What I can tell you is that one of the big reasons that one of the main reasons that they just did away with the extended season in Carryover was, what we found out is, I think, and again, don't quote me on this one.
Right.
I'm going by memory here, and I don't have the information right in front of me, but in like 3 months for that extended season, we had something like maybe 78 deer shot or something like that. I don't even remember. It was so low, it was just, and so we tried this extended season and realized our cycles run 2 years. So when we make a deer regulation for this year, we won't revisit it for another 2 years generally.
Right.
Okay, unless there's some extenuating circumstances. So for the time that they did have in fall here, the kill was very, very low. So for January, February, and March.
Right. Was that possibly because the people that are going to really hunt are going to get their limit, whether they got 2 months or 3 months or 4 months to get it, right?
You get bonus tax.
Again, the equation is large,
Right.
and we don't always know all the variables. Some of it is just the fact that when you're talking about February and March, now you're talking about, because this is that extended season is antlerless only, okay? It's only basically the female deer, unless somebody ends up shooting a buck that's lost its antlers. But you're talking about female deer now that have visible, recognizable fawns in them. Okay? And there's a lot of hunters out there that, to them, that's just not something they want to do. So they're not interested in, and it's why some people that we give damage permits or kill permits to, they kind of aren't interested in it in like April, May, and June, and they might pick back up in August and September.
So when you extend the season, you don't do it prior, earlier in the fall, you do it later in the winter?
Correct.
Okay, so right now, I think it's through the first week of January.
That's
right?
correct.
Right. So if we ask permission to extend this, say, through January, would the doe still be necessarily pregnant?
Yeah, that, again, you know, the does biologically are generally bred starting October, November is really the peak time.
Right.
And through December.
Right.
So you can get it any of those times. November is really the huge time.
Right.
For the breeding season and,
Right.
so, you know, again, I can't tell you if it extended it, if it got extended through January, I can't tell you, sit here and tell you that it would be any different than what we experienced in Fauquier, where
Right.
they had an extended 3-month season.
Right.
And just, and the hunters just didn't go out and participate, they just
Right.
didn't.
Because, yeah, they're not accustomed to doing it either.
I mean, you know, and realistically in Rappahannock, so first Saturday in October, bow season starts. So hunters can start taking
Right.
deer in October, and then first Saturday in November, muzzleloader season starts.
Right.
And then, you know, it goes on from there, rifle season all the way through the first Saturday. So they essentially have, you know, a little over 3 months.
Right.
To take deer. It's just, again, that's why I want to impress upon you, the variables are so many, the equation stuff. It's how do we get hunters to go out and participate? How do we get people to go out and participate? How do we get them? And this is one of the things that our department tries to do and we struggle with. I mean, and realistically, hunting license sales are going down every year. So we've got less hunters, less hunter effort.
Right.
And meanwhile, the deer are just out there going to town.
Right.
And so, you know, these are the things that are you know, that's why we have a large effort underway with our department, well, it's nationwide. Just we're trying to retain hunters, reactivate hunters,
Right.
and recruit hunters.
Yeah.
You know, because young people just want to spend more time in front of a TV screen or you know, doing something else than out there. But so there's many reasons. There's a lot of different strategies that can be used. It's just that, you know, things that we found out that just didn't work, and that extended season didn't work in Fauquier. It really didn't make a drastic difference. And what I can tell you is that I'm on the deer committee for the state. If there are ideas that a locality has, they can certainly always be entertained because we talk about them in these meetings. And the biologists will have a bunch of data and they'll stick it up there and they'll be able to show, you know, what the deer population in the county looks like and, you know, what the harvest looks like. And, you know, they may even have some more information on things like, you know, in Rappahannock County, I don't know if they do, but like things like hunter effort and stuff like that. And so we take all of these things into account in the deer committee when we're discussing, you know, are we going to bring something to the board? So, you know, it's based on, you know, what we're seeing in a county, requests we're getting in a county, cultural carrying capacity versus biological carrying capacity. What does our data show? And then based on that, and there's 30-some people on this committee. It's biologists from all over the state, law enforcement from all over the state. And, you know, we may craft something that at that point we take to the board, and the board just makes the decision that it'll be passed or it won't. So it's not always it's a well thought out process, I guess is the shortest way for me to say. It's not always quick, but it's certainly looked at and well thought out. So, you know, people have ideas about things that certainly can be entertained. I just want to impress upon you guys that, again, you know, there can be more to it than just the perception that there's, you know, and I know, you know, you guys, there's no doubt about it. We all see way more deer than we ever have in our entire life. You know, the perception that there's more vehicle strikes, yes, it can be. And it only takes one bad instance. I think in 2017, you guys had a fatality as a result of a vehicle deer crash. You know, one like that, you know, and that's one deer too many. So, we try to balance all those things when we're looking at, what we're going to do with the hunting season and whether we're going to extend it and things like earn a buck and those kinds of things. And then you add into it our newest fun friend, chronic wasting disease, which, and so now, we've got to manage those kinds of things too, for the health, just for the health of the animal population. So.
And that's still 2 counties away from Rappahannock, is
Is that in Warren now?
Culpeper.
It's in Culpeper now?
Yeah, we found one in Culpeper this year.
When you call pepper silver right in the middle.
Yeah, we found one in Culpeper this
You
past
got
year.
it in Warren.
And we do have, you have it in Warren, Shenandoah, Clark. Yeah.
Regarding earn a buck, I see that Rappahannock's among the counties that it's 1 antlerless to an antlered deer, but Clark, Frederick, Warren is 2 antlerless for 1. Can you compare, is one method more effective? Why is there a distinction?
So, again, I mentioned the deer committee. That would be the reasoning behind where there might be a difference is because what the deer population data show among
Trying to get those ratios closer.
Among and between those counties. Remember, I mentioned to you that there was sort of that little, we have sort of a, we want to make deer more abundant, we want to make deer less abundant, kind of an arrow, and where Rappahannock might lie versus where Frederick and Clark might lie.
So Clark, Frederick, and Warren, with a 2-to-1 ratio, that would thin the herd more quickly? Right? In theory.
In theory.
With multiple variables.
In theory.
But then people say it's not working.
In theory, it should. In theory, it should. And my guess is that would be a result of maybe the density of the deer. Because I don't have Clark, Warren, and Frederick are the other side of the mountain for me, and so I'm just speculating here. But I know we go through these things. We go through these charts. In the deer committee where we look at all of these different counties, we look at the entire state, and we look at what the deer population is doing and what do we need to do with this county and what's the density. And I'll give you just an interesting fact. If you were going to guess what county in Virginia has the most dense deer population, what might you think?
Fairfax.
What?
Fairfax.
Arlington.
Where?
Arlington.
Bedford. Bedford County has the most dense deer population in the state of Virginia. And they have been just absolutely beating the door down. They only have a 2-week season. so that's going to change.
No, and so is that a DGIF regulation? They only have a 2-week season, or is that?
That's a DGIF regulation. But understand, there's always been this west of the Blue Ridge, east of the Blue Ridge, and west of the Blue Ridge has always just had a 2-week season. And now you got Bedford County where the deer population is exploding. They just happen to be west of the Blue Ridge County. That's going to change, by the way. We're addressing that. But the point is that you don't always know. You have in your mind that like Loudon's just so full of deer, or it's got to be more deer than anywhere. Southampton County in South Side Virginia, just packed with deer. They're not even as dense as Bedford County. So again, we look at all these things, and we look at across the board what the deer population is doing in these counties, and then we try to craft those regulations around what the density is of the deer population. And then, again, we have to take into account things like, biological issues, like disease issues, cultural carrying capacity, those kinds of things. And, so is it possible that the earn a buck regulation can be changed in Rappahannock County to where you shoot 1 buck and then you have to kill 2 does before you get your next buck? It's possible, yes.
Are there any annual reports or anything like that have this statistical data that you're talking about for Bedford or this or whoever? That we just so we understand where we stand, and
And are there any reports that
You know,
the
that's
biologists
a
could
good question.
prepare?
They put out, you know, they always put out harvest information. That's out every year. And there's things like that on our website. But I'm not aware that there's anything about deer densities or anything like that. And that's a better question for one of our biologists. If there is one, I haven't personally ever viewed one.
I guess where I'm heading towards is, how would this board know whether they wanted to ask the deer committee or a biologist under the DJ umbrella, or make a recommendation?
How do you know whether you're like Bedford or like Wise County?
Right.
Well, you just have to take my word for it. When I'm sitting in the deer committee and looking at these literally 198 slides of deer counties that we're going through, and you know, we're all sitting there going, oh my gosh, you know, and I'm exaggerating, but
It's only 95.
because I'm exaggerating. You know, there are some counties where we know automatically. I mean, you know, we know like in Wise County and places like that, we want to increase deer abundance just because, I mean, some of those places just don't have a lot of deer. You know, so some of them we can go through very quickly. You know, so we can go through certain places very quickly. The biologists have a real good feel for what the deer density is, and we go through some of these things, you know, very quickly in certain places. Certain places sometimes become a hot topic, and they can become a hot topic for a lot of different reasons. It can be law enforcement related. It can be that a local biologist has maybe a little bit different perspective on things than what our deer biologists do, because we have sort of a state deer biologist and then like his assistant who's kind of over the whole state. But that's why we get everybody in the room together. And this information is gathered in a myriad of ways. And they put all this data together with all these lovely graphs and PowerPoints and everything, which I chose not to bore you guys with tonight. But that's how we go. That's how we gain that information. That's how we know.
No, I'm sorry, we like pie charts.
So I think what I'm hearing is, you know, on the range of counties and deer density, et cetera, we're kind of in the middle, and DGIF is of a mind that really don't have to be pushing our population one way or another very much based on the regulations in place right now. Is that a big paraphrase there?
Yeah, and again, I mean, you know, Rappahannock is sort of in the, you know, we're doing a slight herd reduction based on what we're seeing, which is the reason for the earner buck and the 2 versus 1.
But no thought that we'd need to push it to some greater harvest. We're in a good status right now.
Yeah, I mean, you absolutely, you know, you absolutely can, and you know, certainly, I'm gonna, when we get done, I'm gonna communicate with the deer biologist some of the things we talked about tonight. You know, the questions that we always get when we try to make a regulation, there's always all these stakeholders. So we have the board of Rappahannock as a stakeholder, and you have a bunch of constituents that are stakeholders. Some of them are farmers, some of them are hunters, some of them belong to the Virginia Deer Hunters Association, some of them belong to the Virginia Dog Hunters Association. So we have all these stakeholders that are beating on the door of the game department and saying, do this, do this, do this, do this. And so what we have to fall back on, because that's where the board is going to ask us, especially when it comes out of our committee, you know, what are we going to do or what do you recommend? And really all we have to fall back on is our empirical information. And so, you know, that's what's most of the time going to drop the bus. And I won't say that that's all the time, but that's what we have to fall back on, because when people start asking us questions, why did you do or not do something? You know, a bad answer, and I think you guys can appreciate this, is Well, just, we thought was the politically expedient thing to do. That's a bad answer from how we manage.
Good to have data.
We shouldn't say that. We should say it was biologically, based on our empirical data, where we feel like we should be. But again, I can't sit here and tell you that if you're interested in, changing, tweaking that earn a buck, that is, I'm telling you, the committee would consider it. But what they're going to do is they're going to look at the empirical data and say, does this make sense?
I don't get a vote. I just don't know how to know whether it's a good idea or not. How can we get the biologists and the deer committee to analyze whether it makes sense for Rappahannock? I guess it would be my.
Well, every 2 years we do.
Oh.
That's what they do. That's what we do. We do it statewide. And so, we have district biologists who are out doing some stuff. And then we have regional biologists that are doing some stuff. And then we have the statewide deer biologist that's doing some stuff. And so all this information gets pumped into the state deer biologist. And it comes from a myriad of things. It can be things like spotlight censuses, spotlight census counts. It can be looking at vehicle deer collisions, hunter success surveys. It's just so much stuff, and they sift through all the stuff. It can be things like harvest information is part of it. So they sift through all of these things to come up with this information.
So you do odd year or even year when you make your?
I'm sorry?
When you tweak something, is it odd year or even year that you initiated?
That's a good question. And I don't remember we just did hunting raids this year.
And that was based on the 2017 data?
We just did hunting raids in this 2019. So we just did hunting raids. So next year will be fish raids. And then it'll be deer raids in 2021. But that doesn't mean that, we won't, that it's hard and fast rule, but that's generally the cycle we work under, is every other year.
So what I think I'm hearing, please tell me I'm wrong if I am, but so you generally would tend toward tweaking the earn a buck rather than the extended season based on experience? I get what you're saying.
What I'm saying is that those are both strategies to accomplish a management objective. And that when we determine what strategy we're going to use to accomplish a management objective, we fall back on the empirical data to say, this is what we need to do to accomplish a management objective. Right. And right now, the management objective in Rappahannock County is a herd reduction, but not a drastic herd reduction. Okay? It's not, again, there's a little scale there. We want way more deer, we want way less deer, and Rappahannock is kind of somewhere, sort of in the middle or middle third, if that makes sense.
Is there a report of any kind that you could provide the board that substantiates why Rappahannock is in the middle and it's appropriate to be in the middle?
I am sure that the biologists could provide you with.
I think that would help them understand.
They could provide you with all kinds of information. They got charts and graphs, and I'm telling you.
I think they would appreciate it.
And I'm more than happy to ask them to. We did ask one of the biologists to come with us, and well, fortunately for him, he's on vacation for 2 weeks. So he said, "Sorry, I'm gonna be out of town." But they have all kinds of stuff related to the area up here and the counties up here, and why we're doing what we're doing. And they've got graphs and charts, and they sent me a number of graphs and charts. And I told them I was coming here to speak to you all, just to you, so we could talk a little more intelligently about the things that you're asking. So I guess the short answer is, yeah, that's possible. I just would have to ask them. So.
Well, personally, I think y'all did a good job on prison, because they're back. I don't know if it was just the regs or maybe they prolificated because of the stink bugs were everywhere to eat them, but.
Well, we've done a great job with deer too, because we didn't used to have any of those. Now we got lots of those, don't we?
We're too successful.
We were too successful, yeah. Yeah.
They're everywhere.
Yes.
And the bear are back.
I'm sorry.
The bear.
Bear, yes.
Can I ask you a bear question?
Sure.
So I'm a member of Company 1 Fire and Rescue over here in Washington. Probably gonna pass it on the way out. Warren Avenue. There's 2 dumpsters there. I think one we own and one is owned by the town of Washington. There's a lot of events there, so, you know, people are done in the hall, you know, they're putting their food trash in there, and frankly, there are neighbors that know it's a common deposit area, instead of taking it up to Flatland. There's a big bear problem there. It's basically a feeding trough. Does DGIF have any kind of program to participate in a bear-proof dumpster program?
So, but
Actually, we've had this issue in Washington as well as up into the Hollow in Sperryville at the Trading Post Cafe. If you have updike canisters or public canisters, both companies have programs for bear-proof dumpsters. Updike, in my experience, has been a little more reluctant to give you a full bear-proof dumpster with steel doors. But if you refuse to use their equipment, they will bring you one. Which is exactly what Mr. Eric Colson had to do. He kept having the bear come in and come in and come in. They gave you plastic doors, they gave you chains. You go up there now, he has a steel door and a steel door on top. You basically say, look, if you're not gonna do it, I have a company that will. Republic was much easier to deal with than Flint Hill. The owner of what's now the Blue Door, it was the owner prior to, I can't remember who that was, but they basically called Republic and said, hey, I have a bear problem. And they showed up 2 days later with a full steel door bear-proof dumpster. So both companies offer it. Updike's a little more harder to get on board with it. But as far as the agency, we don't have any pull other than you can threaten them and say, look, we're going to get some paperwork if we keep feeding these bears, so we're going to stop using your equipment. And they will eventually come along and help you out.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if they added any extra charge to either of those companies for the restaurants, for the services, but you can always ask Eric or the owner of the Blue Door. They should be able to help you.
Okay. Appreciate that.
Can citizens be cited for not having a proper disposal container?
Yes.
You talk about paper, okay.
Yeah, so the way it's written is if we determine that you putting your trash out into your dumpster is the bear attractant, and you continue to do so knowing the bear is attracted there, then we show up, we issue the warning at first. If continued efforts prove that you're still feeding that bear, then you're subject to being summoned for the same offense.
we just need you to try the bear-proof stuff. So if you're showing us you're making an effort, that's different than someone who says, I don't care, I'm gonna keep putting my stuff out, and I'm just gonna keep putting my stuff out, and it doesn't make any difference what it does to the neighbor or somebody else. Well, those are the people that they get a warning first, and then if they don't clean it up after we give them the written warning, we'll give them something.
And I suppose I know with the Park Service, they'll haze bears if they're getting, too.
We encourage bear harassment all the live long day. We'll even give you shot to do it. With a little set of instructions in there that tell you, do this, don't do that, and, make sure you use it correctly, and if it says any misuse is, your fault. The disclaimer,
Right.
the legal disclaimer.
What do you use? What's in there? Salt or something? Or
It's a rubber ball.
Yeah.
It's a very lightweight load. These rounds are actually designed for people control in places like prisons. So it's not a lethal round. Can it be lethal? Yeah, if you use it the wrong way. I mean, if you shoot anything with a projectile, in the eye or something like that, you're just trying to hit it in the hind end. But we can give people all kinds of advice about hazing bears. I mean, paintball guns work great.
And that's not, there's no violations or anything?
There's no violation.
So
Paintball
information
guns.
sharing is important.
Absolutely, absolutely. People, we have a hotline number that people can call Monday through Friday that will give them some, advice about how to take care of things when bears come around. And so, that's available. We will give them advice. Our biologists will give them advice. And if you, 99% of the time, if you'll bear proof, just put some stuff away and do a little harassment, in less than a week's time, the bear will move on and go someplace else. Most of the time.
Officer Bostic, did we have any problem in the schools at all with bears?
We haven't had any problems with the schools as far as them getting in dumpsters that I'm aware of.
Okay.
We have the occasional pass-through, because especially the elementary school being, cellars behind it. And that thoroughfare down beside the doctor's office across 211, it's a very common one for the bears to travel. I think that's probably one of my hot spots for bear cubs being spotted. So, but usually they either succumb to a vehicle in 211 or they move on. But I haven't had any issues with them congregating in schools. Even with Flatwoods being close to the high school, it has been an issue.
But we're happy to work with anybody that, just give us a call. We'll work with, whatever it is. Either one of us will come help you as much as we can, or we'll get a biologist or a wildlife tech involved or something. So we'll try to work with you, and we certainly can steer you in the right direction for usually just some common sense, basic tips that we've learned over the years for things that can help out. So, thank you.
Great.
Where's your office located?
It's parked out there.
It's parked, yeah. Our regional office is in Verona. We have what they call a field office in Fredericksburg as well. And our main headquarters is in Henrico. So.
When's the last time you've been there?
Henrico?
I don't know last time I went there. You've been there since I have.
You go there in trouble.
I try to stay away from there because when they see me, oh, hey, we've got something for you. And it's usually more work.
Thank you.
Yeah, but I haven't been to.
Make sure that makes it in the minutes.
Once a month. I have to go to Verona once a month at a minimum for a meeting. But we work out of our cars mainly and out of our homes. But that's why we live in the localities where we work. Which is why when we come to someplace like this, we can talk intelligently about the doctor's office and the person in Sperryville and those kinds of things.
Excellent. Cool. So we'll come up with some kind of.
We'll have public comment in just a moment.
Anything else we can answer for you?
Yes.
Anita wants to know if she has a question.
No, I was just looking at the agenda. Go ahead.
May I ask a question? Thank you.
Yeah.
If we were to ask for an extended season, what kind of cost is that to the state? I mean, just kind of generally, do you have to have more people doing anything, or you have to set up anything that would cost the state more money? Because if there's other counties that extend, so, I mean,
Well, I mean, it's
just
just.
be part of the group, I would think.
It's just more work for myself and my officers, because it would just be something else, where we have to do some enforcement, and monitoring and things like that. But, I mean, other than that, but because as conservation police officers, we're a very small force anyway. We just have to pick what we do on a daily basis, because we can't be everywhere all the time. It's like other law enforcement, you can't be everywhere all the time. So you have to decide, what your priorities are for the day. So that just might add something to our priority list.
For the week or two or three.
But I mean, in terms of, you know, in terms of, does it cost us money to create a longer season? I mean, not necessarily, it's just, we have to put more enforcement effort out. The biologists obviously have to do more monitoring. We have to change certain things on our, like electronic checking data and things like that, because these animals, you know, have to be checked in. You know, so those types of things have to be changed. So there's, you know, some personnel costs involved with IT people, you know, changing, you know, because you aren't going to be checking a deer in February in Rappahannock County. If you do, you're going to get a knock on the door from one of us pretty quickly. But it would change. Again, it would change certain things like that, where we have telephone check-in, computer check-in.
Because I know you do all.
Yeah, we would, you know, and we still have a few little mom and pop shops that, you know, do the paper check-in, so it might change things like that. And, you know, there's some costs involved with that, but, you know, it's not I mean, I don't want to say it's
not cost
I don't want to say it's not a huge cost, it's just because everything for us, because our department budget is always so tight, anything that adds a little more cost to us is a little bit of a strain, but it's not like a huge one.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
But in Loudoun County, the extended season is antlerless.
I'm sorry, the extended
season
is what?
Antlerless?
Yeah, it was in Fauquier. That extended season is antlerless deer hunting.
I just learned something because I've never participated in one, but I know some boys over around St. Louis that are making drives and shooting bucks. So apparently they're doing something illegal. I mean, I guess I better go make sure.
I mean, I
pictures on my computer.
I guess I might have to look more specifically at the Loudoun County Reg.
No, knowing these guys, it could very well be illegal.
Yeah, I'd have to look more specifically at the Loudoun County Reg because that's a county that is not necessarily in my district. So, but I can tell you the one in Fauquier, that extended season was absolutely.
I've never participated in one, but I just know
that extended season was absolutely 100% animals. Yeah.
You know, they're not.
Well, we'll be happy to provide you with our information so that you can give us a phone call.
I probably talked too much already.
Has that ever happened before?
Someone else care to speak?
I just wondered if the deer and the bear pressure are affected by droughts or lots of rain or.
Can be.
Okay.
That's why, I go back to, you know, the variables are many.
Yeah.
So if we have a mass crop failure, you're going to see more animals from out of the mountains who generally are going to stay back there and eat that, and eat acorns and things like that. So they may invade farm fields more.
Or grapes.
So the farmers are going to experience more damage.
Or grapes, we raise grapes. And a few years ago with the drought, we had a lot of bear pressure.
Well, and see that, and again, so it can be, and again, you know, it's part of what our department does. You know, we'll investigate these things, you know, we'll research these things, and we try to put our finger on it. But sometimes we just don't know why. It's just Mother Nature doing what Mother Nature does. And so, yes, environmental conditions absolutely can affect it. And we don't always, sometimes, we find out after the fact. I'll give you an example. One of the things that, you know, is perfect is, you know, all of a sudden a landowner comes in and clear cuts their property. Well, okay, what's that going to do to the wildlife that was using it for cover? It's going to displace it someplace. So that could be, you know, and I mean, I don't know about you all, but I've done it. I've driving these back roads and the forest was here one day and the next day I come by and, man, when did they do that? You know, it's gone. So, you know, again, it can be just a huge variety pack of things. And that's one. Okay.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you so much.
Anything else? Okay. If y'all need us, I'll be happy to, well, you know how to get in touch with me. You got my cell phone number, right?
Yes, sir. Soon I haven't lost it.
Huh?
I
got me on speed dial, did you?
Hopefully we don't need it.
Oh, yes, thank you.
I don't know if I have enough, but you know, I don't have enough prepared, but I don't think in my pocket. Thank you.
I don't need.
But if you need one, he has how to get in touch with me. So.
We'll just get in touch with him.
And you can get in touch with him. Yep. He's here for you all the time.
Wildlife that had been mapped, the statistics.
How you feel?
Thank you.
The way we tried to attack the bear population
Yeah, so give me that.
during the
Don't
bad
do
drought
that.
up in Virginia was we put a boom box up there with the
catch that.
CRT on it.
Right. Lights and sound work
Right in
great.
the office.
And I come home at night, I hear from the class and closed nerve center.
Right. Yep. Ladies and gentlemen, have a good rest of the meeting.
Thank you very much for coming out. Appreciate it. You can stick around and have public comment if you want. All one.
Anyone wishing to speak will have the opportunity to do so. Is there anyone who needs more explanation?
Good to bring it in sometimes.
Public hearing is open.
Oh, there aren't any public hearings, sorry. This is public comment.
Oh, I got public hearing.
Yeah, it's just a heading, there's nothing to it.
We will have public comment. Anyone who can speak will have the opportunity to do so. We just have to recognize.
I think you should limit the time, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, I think we should. 15 minutes per. Public comment open. Anyone care to speak? Anyone care to speak? Public comment is closed. Old business, new business.
So what about discussion on this topic? I mean, what about it if we consider extending the season 1 week and going to a the Iron Buck program, two doe instead of one? And what about if we applied for both of those two items?
I think you probably want some comment from public.
We could have
Hunting.
a public hearing, yeah, we could have a public hearing, but I mean, is that worth considering?
Well, it sounded like they're not really gonna do anything until maybe next year, start looking at it, but I don't know of any extended season except what they did in Fall Creek, what they're doing in Loudon, and of course Prince William and Fairfax. They're allowing hunting, I think, pretty much year round in Fairfax and all guys boat hunts down there. But it's you know, you gotta get the sheriff to give a permit. I think it's limited to bow.
And a 3-4 acre minimum,
Yeah,
something like that.
it's a lot of, as he kept reiterating, it's a lot of variables. But in Prince William, I think it's mostly shotgun or muzzle loader only, because they don't allow rifles. And Loudon, I think it's anything goes. I guess as long as it's antlerless. But those boys I know over there, they're not real particular. And I think that the farmers, I mean, they're hunting on farmers. Farmers knows what they're doing, so the farmers are in on it. They just want to clear them out.
Well, we did get some feedback from the Ernabuck program. There were people that were adamantly against it. So, I mean, if you double it in does, you got to get, before they get another bucket, hey, I mean, I'd be very happy about it, but
I think
it
we
would
have to do
definitely
something.
sound like if there's any one thing we could do to decrease the population, that would be it.
Well, you know, most every one of the doe are dropping twins, if not triplets.
But I say that would be the one single thing we could do to decrease the population if we want to consider that.
So every day you take out, you're taking out a minimum of 2, if not 3 deer, maybe 4, if they have triplets.
I could reach out to Sarge and ask him to connect with the biologist and provide some data on our effectiveness, densities, et cetera, with the Ernabuck.
I thought the coyote would have a bigger impact on it, but it appears that it's not. I don't. They're heating them,
They've helped a lot.
but they're
It
taking
would be
care
a lot
of,
worse without them, that's for sure.
they're taking care of the feral cat problem too. I mean, you remember, what, 20 years ago, we had that feral cat problem, man, it was horrible. Do you see many cats now?
The coyotes are doing all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, they're taking care of the feral cats and Fluffy too.
But let me know if you want me to do
I wonder too about the Hunters for the Hungry program that we have here in the county. How do we steer those numbers? Is that maxed out in terms of what we,
Not at all.
what we pay? That's what was my recollection, is that we did have money that we had allocated.
We
to
could
that.
advertise it more broadly.
I wonder if that would be something that I would think would be a win-win if we could steer that to helping, decrease the numbers and at the same time
When I get
bring in
my,
more deer.
when I get my Hunters for the Hungry newsletter, it doesn't list anything in Rappahannock.
Well, we're not.
We're not
official.
We're not that. We looked into that.
Right.
We looked into, and it was too much red tape.
So it's just a
Then
direct
we came up with this idea where they just take it to Manford, drop it off, the county pays the $50, and it goes to the food pantry.
I think he mostly turns it into burger because burger can be used so easily.
Right, that's good. And some years they've had it up through, into the summer. But here lately they run out, I think, before that. But no, that would be ideal to encourage people to.
I think we allocated $5,000 a couple of times. And,
So two the last couple of years.
Yeah, it's been around 2,000.
Yeah, but we've spent maybe 800.
Oh, so we allocate two and we spend 800?
Well, they're not,
It's just, we just pay the bills when they come in, yeah.
Yeah.
And we did, Mimi contacted me last year and asked me to help her get the word out and put something on Rappahannock.
And it was.
I know people that were contributing to that, but they got busy and they said they wanted to try and get one the last week or so and they never did do it. It didn't happen.
But if you got the earning buck, then you can take your dough and send it off to the food pantry and then go get your buck and get your dough and send it to the food pantry.
I wonder how many hunters will get that first buck and then knowing they have to get two more doe before they can take another buck, will just say, well, I got my buck, so I'm folding the tent for the year.
I think there is
This could be a disincentive to
Yeah.
go out and continue.
So I was trying to ask them for some of that data on how it's worked and more, but there's so many other variables probably couldn't compare.
Okay, well, I guess that's that.
So I'm gonna ask them for data. but-
Right.
Yeah, it's all about the data.
No, I do think if we are serious about reducing the deer population, I do think it's worthwhile to look into the idea of having a two doe instead of one between bucks.
What about the extended season? You still like that?
I think we extended the year. It sounded like to go a long time isn't gonna make much difference. But we could extend it a week or 2 weeks.
I don't know how many deer are taken, he says, only 70 or 80 deer, but how many are taken in season?
It was in the paper.
Yeah.
And that was fast.
The problem is the harvest is down because people just.
Zero hunters.
I would just think 70 or 80 deer, okay, why not?
Yeah.
Right.
Take them out. I mean, I don't buy a license because if I see one, I see it on my place, so I quit buying a license. It's a waste of money. I don't go anywhere. I get more with the truck. I buy a license.
Right. Well, the only deer I ever checked, I drowned it. I didn't even shoot it.
Drowned it.
I drowned it, so, in the river.
That might be a long story.
It is, so I won't get into it.
Not in the record.
With respect to these bear dumpsters, maybe that's just something that gets folded into when you're
Well, that's
bidding out a contract?
And that's a customer thing, so if it's the fire company or the town's dumpster, then they need to reach out.
I thought they said it was the county's dumpster. That's the only reason I asked.
We're not paying for it.
Yes, it is.
It doesn't mean UpDev knows where all the dumpsters are.
Okay.
Okay, we finished?
Yeah, I think so.
Right.
Ping ponged around, but.
So So we need a motion to adjourn.
Yes.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.